Hello everyone, welcome to What If Deku Was Adopted by Midnight Part 1. Midnight makes a decision. Midnight was visiting the orphanage after her usual patrol. No reason other than the feeling she has been carrying with her for the past few days. She was late to a recent villain attack on an apartment building. A fire-breathing villain was on a rampage caused by the anger at his wife for divorcing him. In the attack he killed his wife, majorly injured 5 people, and caused minor injury to 10. But the most devastating part was when she discovered that his child was supposed to be there in that apartment when he burned it down. That villain was planning on killing his family out of pettiness. Instead, the child came running up to the scene with tears in his eyes as he watched his home burn to the ground with his mother inside. Flashback. Mom? Mama. A child's voice yelled out through the night as a family of 3 followed after a running green-haired boy. No. The older blonde woman covered her mouth at the sight and the man put his arm around his grief-stricken wife. The blonde boy was staring at the inferno with a scowl before glancing back at the green-haired child with a look of pity. Midnight looked away from the scene. It broke her heart to see this. She had just recently graduated, but she wasn't expecting to be greeted with this sort of tragedy so early in her hero job. She was preparing for it to happen, she just didn't want it to be this soon. Poor child. She looked back at the boy with emerald green eyes, large tears streaking down his face. The fire illuminating an orange hue to his grief-stricken face as he watched the building that he lived in, his home, being destroyed by the flames of his father. I'm sorry. I couldn't save her in time. Midnight thought to herself as she looked at the boy's sad expression. If only I was sooner to the scene, I could have saved her. Midnight thought as she silently said a prayer and apology to the woman lost in the fire. Flashback over. The villain was apprehended, but the damage was already done. The building had to be rebuilt and the residents were homeless for a few months. The residents were granted the ability to stay in one of the apartment buildings that the heroes made in cases of situations like these. She felt so bad for the small boy and she felt even worse when he had to be put into the foster system. Namuri caught wind that one of the mother's friends tried to take him in, but social workers wouldn't allow it since they weren't named legal guardians over the boy. From what she knows, the blonde woman put up quite a fight to keep her friend's child with her. So she took it into her own hands to see how the child was doing after being in the system for less than a week. She went in with her civilian clothes in order to not be recognized by anyone there. She wore a dark blue blazer and pencil skirt with a ruffled white dress shirt underneath. She wore small black heels with a dark purple pantyhose made out of ultra-thin material. She carried a small red clutch in her hand for her necessities. Namuri adjusted her glasses before opening the door to the orphanage. Hello. I am Namuri Kayama, I called ahead to meet with Midoriya Izuku. She said to the lady behind the rickety wooden desk. The kind lady nodded and said, the children are all playing outside in the backyard. Follow me, Miss Kayama. Midnight was guided to the backyard where the children were playing. The backyard had a playground with swings, slides, and a big playhouse. There were many toys and balls that were scattered all over the grass. Midnight looked over to the groups of children playing and didn't see the green hair she saw that night. Until Namuri looked over by the tree and saw a small green-haired boy just sitting against a tree looking at the flowers sprouting from the ground. Flashback. Midnight hated the police station. She didn't hate the police officers or detectives, but she hated the vibe of dreariness that always seemed to be in the offices. Namuri was there because she wanted to see about the child of the mother. The file said his name was Midoriya Izuku. His mother was killed by his father in the huge attack. Midoriya Hisashi is currently in prison for the attack and murder of his wife. Then, Midnight was given news that Izuku and the Bakugo family that was watching over him were currently being interrogated. She headed over right away to check the case out with her friend Aizawa. Aizawa Shota aka Eraserhead took down the kid's father as the other heroes on scene saved as much people as they could. The only death was Midoriya Inko. Midnight and Aizawa went into each interrogation room with each person there to finish off their reports. The husband Bakugo Masaru was a quiet person and answered each question calmly. His wife, Bakugo Mitsuki, answered each question but kept asking where her son and Izuku were. Their son, Bakugo Katsuki, knew next to nothing on the incident, only talking about how Deku was only at their place for a few hours before they heard about the incident. Midnight and Aizawa both noticed how he said Deku instead of Izuku. The most interesting was Izuku. He didn't cry as much as when he did at the time of the incident. He replied to the answers given truthfully. But Midnight felt a maternal instinct crawl up into her through when the interrogator asked Izuku why he was so calm. Mama knew what my dad was going to do. His statement had everyone on the other side of the mirror in silence. What do you mean by that? The interrogator questioned, writing down some notes on a piece of paper. Izuku explained, when she packed me up for the sleepover, she packed extra clothes and toys that were my favorite. My mom gave me a small bag of her stuff and a picture album in my school bag with my books. She also gave me a few envelopes with letters inside. My mom also made sure to write down her katsudon recipe in one of my notebooks. Didn't you find her behavior strange? The interrogator asked. He clicked his pen twice. A little. But she was my mom and I didn't know what it meant. When my mom said goodbye, she made it longer than usual. She said that she loved me, she would miss me, and Izuku started to trail off, his eyes becoming misty. The interrogator prompted, what else did she say, Izuku? That she was sorry. The police discovered that the envelopes he mentioned was her will and a multitude of letters she has written him. Each letter was made for him as gifts for the rest of his birthdays until his 100th. He said that she had been writing them for a long time, almost 2 weeks entirely. Which made them sick to the stomach since she must have known that as soon as she declared the divorce that something bad would happen to her. The will she had written gave everything she had left behind to her son and only him, no one could take it away from him. He was allowed to access it all when he turned 15. The will didn't list any guardians. But the heroes noticed how rushed it was, like the mother knew what was going to happen and just wanted the best for him. She finished the last line with an apology to her son and saying how much she loved him. Midnight was the one who noticed the tear stains at the bottom of the page with her signature. Midnight strolled casually over to the boy at the tree and started some conversation. Hey there. She said gently with a grin. Izuku raised his head to look at the woman. Hello. So, do you like heroes? Namuri asked softly. She didn't really know where to keep a conversation rolling. Yeah. I like All Might and Eraserhead the most. Izuku said as he peered up at the woman and her wavy black hair held back in a ponytail. He couldn't help but remember her from somewhere. Oh yeah. Those two are totally my favorites too. Namuri said, trying to be cool in her delivery. What the hell was that? She reprimanded herself inside her mind. Yeah. But don't worry, Izuku said as he remembered where exactly he saw those blue eyes from. I like you too, Midnight-san. Oh, that's wonderful. Wait, what? Midnight asked as she realized what the child had just said. Izuku giggles at seeing her expression. I remember you. That's why I knew who you were. Midnight giggled stiffly at being found out even though she was in her civilian disguise. Was she that noticeable? Should she get a different outfit for these kinds of things? Izuku interrupted her by asking about her quirk. So your quirk. Can it work if you put something like your sweat in little smoke bombs, or does it just work with skin? Midnight answered his question, only to receive more questions with his eyes sparkling from excitement. She smiled back before settling down in the grass beside him. They talked for the rest of the hour before one of the caretaking ladies was ready to let the children back inside. Midnight turned to Izuku before making one of the biggest decisions of her life. Do you want to come home with me? Izuku got stunned into silence. I may not be the best mom or exactly how your mother was, but I will do my best to. Midnight started before getting pulled into a tight hug. Yes, Izuku cried out happily. You are thinking of adopting him, aren't you? Aizawa said deadpan as they walked out the police building. The Bakugo family wasn't allowed to adopt Izuku since they weren't legal guardians, and one of the detectives noticed how Katsuki would talk about Izuku. Even if they wanted to, the will didn't list any caretakers or guardians. What? No. I'm just worried about the little guy. Namuri said as she walked next to him. I bet you will adopt him by the end of the week from just that look in your eyes. Aizawa asked with his usual smile on his face. A kind of creepy grin she got used to seeing during her time at UA. Oh, you are on, Namuri said with a defiant look in her eyes. Yet here she was 3 days later, signing paperwork to quickly adopt Izuku after fostering him for a few months. She thought, damn it. Looked like Aizawa won the bet. But when she looked at Izuku holding her hand while his luggage was being moved to her car with the help of one of the younger ladies, she felt like she didn't lose anything. Izuku looked up like her, felt her looking at him and smiled up at her happily. She felt like they won the best prize ever. Interview time. Midnight thought a nice outing with Izuku to her office would be a good idea. He loved heroes and she worked as one. Perfect idea, right? She could introduce him to new ones on the scene and have some of his favorites autograph his belongings. She was fairly new, but she knew at least one of his favorites is one of her friends. She might have lost a bet, but Eraserhead will soon find out he can't handle the cuteness that the freckled boy radiates. So she brought Izuku to her office to do exactly that last Sunday. She introduced him to her best friend, Hisashi Yamada, who he knew best as Present Mick. Izuku gushed over how not only was he bilingual, but he also did a radio show. Hisashi was more than happy to tell him all about Put Your Hands Up Radio. Izuku was so excited when she introduced him to Iida Tensei, also known as Ingenium. Izuku went on a rampage with questions towards him, asking about if he ever tried using his arm engines as a kind of jetpack. Tensei looked at him like he just blew his mind. He wisely answered, no, but that is a good idea. And lastly, one of his favorite pro heroes, Eraserhead, whose name is Aizawa Shouta. Aizawa felt the wrath of cuteness as he listened to Izuku babble about how cool he was. Izuku asked question after question of him, fighting quirkless to his bright yellow goggles. When he was busy fanboying over the three, Namuri handed a sum of money in an envelope to a slightly smirking Eraserhead. Everything was great. She introduced him to heroes like Snipe and Ectoplasm when they were switching from patrol to office time to finish up some reports. He, of course, freaked out even more seeing the heroes. She smiled at Izuku since she was so glad that he was having the time of his life. But the happy moment came crashing down on Tuesday morning. She gets awoken from a text message alert. She slowly opened her eyes and stretched her limbs out, trying to shake the sleep out of her. She rubbed her eyes before reaching on her nightstand for her phone lazily. Namuri plucked her phone from the charger and saw who decided to text her in the middle of the morning. Hisashi. Her eyes widened when she saw the message. They know about Izuku. Call me ASAP. She hurriedly straightened up as much as she could on her comfortable bed with as little sound as possible. She didn't want to wake up Izuku. Namuri clicked on the call button on Hisashi's contact before waiting for him to pick up. On the second ring, he answered, Namuri, did you get my text? Yes, what is this about? How did they find out about him? Midnight asked as she talked as softly as she could without waking the small boy in the next room. I don't know. I think one of the reporters must have wanted to report on Snipe and followed him only to discover you with Izuku. Namuri cursed herself at not choosing to wait until the heroes got inside the building before introducing them to Izuku. They apparently got short videos and photos of how you acted with Izuku. I think one of the videos actually caught you introducing him as your son. But they don't know his name, which is good so far. Namuri groaned as Hisashi continued on, now the media is going wild with this story. Everyone is saying things about you bad stuff. Hisashi sounded really pissed off when he finished the sentence. They don't even know how good of a mother you are to him, but they are judging you and criticizing you for being a bad influence. They don't even know how good of person you are. I want to slap them all in the face with common sense. Hisashi ranted. Namuri laughed at her friend's words before sobering up at the issue at hand. I might have to hold a press conference or interview regarding the situation. I didn't want people to find out this early. I wanted to at least wait until he was ready. Hisashi agreed, yeah. I vote that you do the interview. Press conferences don't know here to draw the line when it comes to privacy. Well, thanks for the heads up, Mick. Midnight said as she rose from her comfy position on the bed. No problem, Midnight. Hey, if Izuku needs a babysitter anytime soon, you are going to call me and Izawa, right? Hisashi asked. Namuri chuckled at her best friend, yes, you and your little boyfriend can come and watch him the next time I take a longer patrol. Bye-bye. Namuri ended the call after she heard an enthusiastic yelling of yeah. She sighed as she sat down at the edge of the bed, she rested her head in her hands. Why did the press and media have to ruin my new life right now? This mom? Izuku quietly asked from behind the crack in her bedroom door. She wasn't rushing him to replace her as his mother, so she didn't have a problem letting him call her whatever he wanted. As long as he didn't refer to her as Midnight since that was her hero name and she didn't want her identity to be let out by accident. Hey buddy. Did you have a nice sleep? She asked Izuku as he walked up to her in his old all-might honesty. She smiled gently as she watched the little boy come up to the bed before trying to climb onto the top. He started to struggle with his little legs trying to propel himself forward onto the comforter. Okay. Let me help you up. Namuri placed her hands under his arms to lift him up. Hop, there we go, Namuri said as she guided Izuku to sit down on her bed next to her. They looked pretty domestic with him in his onesie and her in her long sweater pajamas. Are you okay? I heard noises. Izuku asked gently to her. She smiled at him. No. Everything's fine. I just have to organize a very important interview today. Everything will be okay. She said, lightly swinging her feet from her nerves. Okay. Alright. I was just worried. Izuku said as he swung his legs back and forth over the edge mimicking her. There is nothing to worry about. Namuri said reassuringly. Can I come? Izuku's voice asked quietly. Wait, what? She thought. What? She asked out loud, turning back to the adorable toddler with blonde twigs of fabric sticking out of his hoodie. When she really looked at his adorable green eyes, she couldn't really say no. Yes, you can come, she answered back to him before thinking to herself. Oh goodness. This will be interesting. Back at it again with Haruto and Himari. Welcome to the show, everybody, two hosts said at the exact same time before the cheer of the small live audience. The man named Haruto stood up in a buttoned-down dark purple shirt with black slacks on, complementing his black dress shoes. The lady named Himari had on a simple amethyst-colored fit and flare dress that had a black belt around her waist. She wore little black flats with a bow that matched the one in her hair. Welcome now, we have a very special guest with us today, Himari said, sounding excited for the guest waiting behind the stage. Yes. A pro hero that has just recently been involved in a rumor that she is going to put to rest right now, Haruto exclaimed with a smile on his face. The crowd grew restless since they could already guess who exactly was it. Please welcome our guest, Midnight, the two hosts said at the same time, revealing Midnight in her hero costume. The crowd went wild at the sight of the hero, most of the men for obvious reasons. Midnight waved and smiled at her fans and supporters before taking a seat on the couch on the other side of the hosts. Izuku sat down in the green room with Hisashi in civilian form. He watched his caretaker through the television backstage as she started to answer the questions that the hosts gave her. He really liked watching heroes give interview like this. It really brings a certain feeling when you get to know a pro hero that you don't really know that much about. Hisashi and Izuku watched as Namuri answered all the regular questions that the hosts gave to her. "How are you? How's it going with the job? It must be difficult." Haruto asked. "I'm doing good. My job is no easy picnic, but I wouldn't say that it is impossible to do. You just have to work hard for it." Midnight answered as best as she could. Amari excitedly asked, "I have been dying to finally meet you. It is such an honor for you to come on our show. We are such huge fans." The hosts both nodded while the crowd clapped and cheered. Midnight replied with a smile, "Well, it's an honor to be here with such lovely hosts. Especially since I called at such a horrendous time. I must have messed up your schedule. I'm terribly sorry." No, it's totally fine, we weren't planning on doing any guests today, so you offering to do an interview with us is no problem," Haruto said, trying to reassure the female pro hero. He felt bad for what they were both going to ask her about since they were genuinely big fans of hers. "So," Himari started, "there is a rumor going about that you have become a mom. Do you want to comment on that?" She asked slowly, trying to see if she was making Midnight mad, cause that is the last thing she wanted. Izuku furrowed his brow at the question. "What?" Hisashi gave a big sigh worriedly. "Well, short answer yes. I adopted him about a few weeks ago." Many gasps from the audience. A lot of them were shocked, but there were some that were disgusted. The host seemed shocked that the rumor was true, but happy with it. Who does she think she is raising a child? Isn't she too busy with her little hero job? Who would be taking care of the boy while she isn't there? This is ridiculous. How is she mother material? Last time I checked, mothers don't go around acting like that or dressing like the way she does. How in the hell is she going to raise a child? That child will be raised horribly. Should I call protective services now? Her hero costume says enough about how she will raise her child." Some women were whispering amongst themselves in the crowd, but they were loud enough for Midnight, the hosts, and the camera to hear them. Midnight ducked her head slightly, gritting her teeth at the insults thrown. The hosts looked ready to throw some people out from the way they were acting. Izuku rushed out of the green room in search for the stage where his new mother was. Hisashi followed behind him, but didn't outright stop him, since he kind of knew what the child planned to do. "They can't say that about her, she is my mom. She's my mom, she cares about me, how dare they," Izuku thought to himself as he rushed past the stage hands and slow security guards. His little feet charged full speed all the way to the stage. The crowd gasped once again in the sight of the adorable toddler. The hosts were surprised as well, but none was more surprised than Namuri. "Don't say that about my mom, she is the best mother anyone could ask for," Izuku shouted as he stood in front of his mom in a protective stance. "I love her, don't say mean stuff anymore." Midnight rose from her seat with tears threatening to stream down her face as she gathered the small child into a hug. Izuku hugged back tight before pulling away to face her. "Nobody can say mean stuff about you while I'm here." Midnight laughed while Izuku wiped a small tear from her cheek. "Don't cry, I'm here now," Izuku said with a smile on his face. The hosts were about to die from the heart attack of cuteness. The crowd was expressing the cuteness they felt with a loud "oh." Hisashi watched from the backstage off to the side of the stage with a smile on his face. The interview continued with Izuku sitting right next to his mom swinging his feet. The hosts were asking questions, and sometimes they would ask questions to little Izuku too. The crowd quieted down for the rest of the interview. The ones who made the comments changed their mind after seeing Midnight and Izuku interact. There was no doubt that Midnight loved the child as much as the child loved her. Babysitting adventure. Midnight took time off her hero job to spend time with Izuku. Since she has adopted him, she has only went out on short patrols or only been called as a last measure to make the villain or criminal pass out. It was about time for her to return so she could take care of Izuku with the proper pay she makes. And tomorrow was the first day back to work. She scheduled a short patrol during morning and late at night. Since Izuku has no daycare tomorrow, she and Izuku were watching The Princess and the Frog tonight as a last bonding moment before she has to work. She scheduled for times that allowed her to still spend time with Izuku during the day, but technically, it was a last hurrah because she was officially returning to her hero work. They were at the part where Tiana turns into a frog when Izuku turned to Namuri and said, "I'm like a frog." Namuri furrowed her brow in confusion. "Why are you the frog, Izuku?" Izuku giggled at the question, "Because my hair and eyes are green." Namuri widened her eyes exaggeratedly. "Oh, that must mean if I kiss you, you turn back into my little prince." Izuku laughed as Namuri began to chase him around the living room. Namuri finally caught him and lifted him up to place many small kisses on his forehead. "There, now you are my little prince." Izuku smiled and laughed with Namuri before they both went back to the movie. Namuri wouldn't trade Izuku for anything in the world. What do you mean I have the whole day? Namuri asked into the phone. What? No, I scheduled for early day and late night patrol. What? Apparently she made a mistake on her schedule that made her work from morning to night, which meant she had the whole day to work. But I have someone to take care of now who is going to watch over Izuku. She thought to herself after she finished the phone call to the boss in charge of all the patrol schedules. But she remembered what one of her best friends offered her, which led her to welcoming the 2 babysitters of the day at her doorstep 20 minutes later. Aizawa had his black hair pulled back into a ponytail and his Ashi had his blonde hair down around his shoulders. They were both dressed casually in civilian clothes behind her apartment door. Hey guys, thanks for helping me on such short notice. Namuri thanked her friends as they walked in to see where the little child was. Their answer was that he was on the couch swinging his feet in an all-might odyssey. No problem, his Ashi said to her loudly as Aizawa strolled over to the kid and sat down gently next to him. They both got introduced to the kid before the whole media thing went down and they were glad they got to see him again. Thank you guys so much, I'll be back late. She said to the two before turning her attention to the calm toddler waiting on the couch. I'll be back later tonight. I won't be gone forever. Make sure you behave for these two, they are my closest trusted friends. I love you, Izuku. Namuri said to Izuku. Izuku peered up into her eyes. I love you, mommy. I'll miss you. I'll miss you too, Namuri said, placing her mask on to finish her hero costume that she has been dressed in for the last 10 minutes. She ordered a change of outfit from her first so she could quiet some rumors that people have been spreading. And now with the revamped ultra-thin material, she could control her quirk better than before. Her son helped her with that. I'll see you fellas tonight, be good, she called out when exiting her door, waving to her friends and son. They all waved back at her fading figure when she left. Hey buddy, his Ashi greeted Izuku as he sat next to his left since Aizawa was already sitting at Izuku's right. Hello, Izuku. Aizawa said to the small child to his left, resting his chin in his hand. Hello. Izuku greeted shyly. Do you want to do anything today, bud? His Ashi asked Izuku as the child swung his feet back and forth. I don't know, Izuku said quietly, thinking about his mom. I vote we stay at home, Aizawa piped up from Izuku's other side. No, shouted, this is the time to give the little listener a day at the aquarium or the zoo, his Ashi argued to Aizawa as Izuku took interest into what he said. Zoo? Izuku asked softly. His Ashi smiled as Aizawa groaned at the happily curious face Izuku made. Why did you have to do this to me, Mick? Aizawa asked with his black ponytail and a leopard print hat that Hisashi got from the gift shop after they enjoyed their lunch. Hisashi was wearing a cockatoo hat with a fellow feather sticking out from the back. Come on, look at how much fun Izuku is having, Hisashi replied to the miserable-looking boyfriend he had. Izuku was definitely having fun with a frog hat covering the top of his curls. Hisashi also gifted him with a rainbow panda plush backpack that Hisashi was carrying in a bag. Izuku didn't ask for anything, but when Hisashi saw those eyes drift towards the panda, he knew what to do. Izuku was currently in front of them heading toward the elephant exhibit. Aizawa was tired from all the walking despite Hisashi trying to cheer him up. So far, they had seen the birds, amphibians, reptiles, and all the other animals. They just needed to see the elephant before they head back home. Izuku was having a really great time with his uncles. He saw so many awesome animals he ran ahead of his uncles to get to the big exhibit of the large grey elephants. Aizawa and his Ashi came up from behind him as he stood in awe at the mother and child elephant eating together. They smiled softly, Hisashi more than Aizawa, at the sight of the small child looking so excited at the elephants. Hisashi read aloud what the description said. Luis, the big elephant, is taking care of Susie, an orphaned elephant, after her birth mother was lost after an incident. Aizawa frowned at the story on the plaque as Izuku's face grew more thoughtful. They are like me and mommy, Izuku said happily at the elephants. We both have someone to take care of us and love us, even though we lost someone. Hisashi sniffled and Aizawa ruffled Izuku's hair at his statement. It hasn't been that long since their friend had adopted him, but he already saw her as someone special to him. Let's get going, Squirt. Say goodbye to Luis and Susie. Aizawa said to Izuku. Okay. Bye-bye, Izuku called out, receiving a trumpet from Susie. He laughed at the sound and waved to the small elephant before following behind his uncles. Safe to say, Hisashi bought a big and small plush elephant pair for Izuku on their way out, much to Izuku's surprised delight. Midnight was so tired from her patrol. She carried her hero costume in a gym bag as she went towards her door in her casual civilian clothes, which was a simple dark blue dress and black flats. Somehow, it seemed that all the criminals knew she was working again and just showed up out of nowhere at so many different places just to make her day terrible. She sighed and unlocked her apartment door. She smiled softly as she remembers the little prince she was doing this all for. She knew that he was the token to bring her smile back. She swung open the door to find Hisashi and Izuku napping on the couch, with Aizawa placing a blanket over the two. You don't mind if we sleep over, right? Aizawa asked as he gestured to his knocked-out boyfriend on the couch with Izuku lying on his chest. The TV was playing the Jungle Book credits, illuminating their sleeping form. No problem at all. I'm sure I have 2 futons in my closet. Namuri said quietly as she walked over to the closet. So what happened? Did you 3 have fun? They did, I can't say so for my headache from making sure these 2 didn't get into trouble though. Aizawa replied as he unrolled a futon that his friend handed to him. So, we spent a good day at the zoo. Aizawa mumbled slightly to her. Great. I was so worried, but it seems Izuku had fun today. So I'm happy. She said it, the toddler happily snoozing away on the chest of one of her best guy friends. And hey, now I know, Aizawa said as he snuggled up in the futon. Know what? Namuri asked tiredly as she laid down in a separate futon. The reason you fell for him and wanted to take care of him. Aizawa mumbled as he started to doze off. He thought as he drifted off, the little kid has potential to be something great in the future. Izashi is probably going to bug me and getting a child of our own soon, by the way he is spoiling Izuku, he thought when he went to sleep. The wrong diagnosis leads to unfortunate accidents. Midnight sat in silence with Izuku crying his eyes out into her shoulder at home. They just got back from him being diagnosed as quirkless. Apparently the X-ray was a bit blurry, but the doctor concluded from the blurry screen that he will be quirkless. Izuku has been sad ever since, so she called up some friends to help him cheer up. The doorbell rings and Namuri goes to answer it, gently coaxing Izuku to lay back down. She opens the door to Hisashi and Aizawa in their normal clothes. Is the little listener okay? Hisashi questioned and a worried quiver to his voice. Those doctors don't really know how to do their jobs correctly. I never liked them. Where is he? Aizawa asked politely but with a tense tone. He has been crying ever since the appointment. I think he is really disappointed that he was told he couldn't be a hero by that doctor. He hasn't talked since we left even when we got home. He is in his room right now. Hopefully he will cheer up with you guys here. Namuri responded, guiding them to Izuku's room. Izuku's room was right across from her own bedroom. His ceiling adorned with glow-in-the-dark stars. He had basic light wood furniture like a writing desk, a clothing dresser, and bookshelves that filled the wall next to his bed. His bed was a simple light red comforter covering a dark blue sheet. There Izuku was crying his eyes out into a teddy bear that she gifted him a few weeks after she adopted him. The giant elephant plush from the zoo visit laid above his head of curls. Hey, buddy. We heard about what happened. You can talk to us if you need to. Hisashi said, resting his hand on Izuku's back. He rubbed it as Izuku sniffled back his tears. Listen, kid, I'm not good with words. But I just want you to know what that doctor said was complete crap. Aizawa piped up next to Izuku's side. He heard a giggle from the child amongst the tearful gasps. It's true. You know how my quirk works, right? Aizawa asked, gaining a slow nod from the sad boy. Aizawa continued, my quirk isn't flashy and it doesn't really help with combat. That means I fight my battles mostly quirkless. So does Hisashi. His quirk is meant for long distance, but when he encounters a villain short distance, he will resort to martial arts. Do you see where I'm getting at? Izuku looked a bit confused with his tear-filled eyes turned to look at him from where he laid. It means that you can be a hero. No matter if you have a quirk or not, you can become a hero. You might need a little training, and the 3 of us are all ready to help you achieve it. Aizawa explained. Izuku smiled despite his red face and said. Thank you, Uncle Aizawa. Aizawa's cheeks reddened before Namuri and Hisashi dive-bomb Izuku into a hug, forcing him to fall into it. Izuku's giggles were accompanied by attempts to make him smile, no matter what they talked about. But at the end of the day, Izuku was back to his usual self again. And he knew that he would become a hero. So he could save people just like his mama. Bakugo was kind of happy for Deku. He was worried that he wouldn't get to see him again when he went to the foster home, but he got adopted by a pro-hero that helped apprehend the villain. He felt bad that not only did he lose his awesome auntie, but also Izuku lost his mom in that attack. So seeing him again made him want to be a bit nicer. If he wanted to be a hero, he would have to stop acting like a villain. A type of villain that killed his mother, he never wanted to become like that. So when Izuku came back to the daycare, Bakugo made sure that Izuku was okay and stuff. It had only been less than a year since the accident. And Bakugo was excited to see what quirk Izuku had. That way they could be heroes together. I'm quirkless, Izuku replied to him when he came in that day. What? No, that crap doesn't make sense. Bakugo responded in disbelief. Does that mean you don't want to be heroes with me, Deku? Of course I do, Izuku said, furrowing his brow at his friend. Bakugo blinked then nodded. Okay, then we become heroes, simple as that. Do you really mean it? Izuku asked with a grateful smile. Tatsuki shrugged. Yeah. Sure. Why? You playing heroes with me or not? Yes, Kakin. Izuku agreed with a grin which Kakin returned with a smirk. The two began to play heroes before Bakugo's fake friend sauntered up to them. "Hey Bakugo, why are you hanging out with a loser?" The first one said, stopping right in front of Bakugo with a mocking pout. "Yeah, come play with us," the second mentioned right from behind the first. "Screw you guys, can't you see we're playing here? Get your own spot," Katsuki yelled out in anger and annoyance to the extras. A third appeared from behind Bakugo and pushed Izuku to the ground. Katsuki turned back to see his friend on the ground. He saw red and called on his explosive quirk. "Don't mess with me, extra." Izuku weakly opened his eyes from the ground to see a blurry version of Kaken going to attack the boy who pushed him. Everything seemed to happen in slow motion. Izuku reached out his hand toward Kaken and whispered, "Wait. Stop, Kaken." The explosion that was aimed toward the bully's face was bent toward the sky at the last second. The flame shot out and set a small ember sailing to a blade of grass in front of Izuku's face. Several things happened at once. The friends ran away from the heated Bakugo. Katsuki looked at his hands and back toward where the explosion was aimed. He realized where he aimed wasn't where it shot and was wondering what the hell just happened. Meanwhile, Izuku freaked out at the sight of the burning blade of grass. The heat of it felt like the heat that night that he dreaded. The sight of it reminded him of when his father, the villain who killed his mother, his home, fire ablaze, fire breathing quirk, fire, mama, fire caused it to happen. Fire was the reason his mom perished. Fire is bad, get away, bad, don't hurt me, stay away. Izuku's mind faded to blackness as his quirk began to unleash around him. Bakugo looked from his hands back up to see the bench a few feet away from him floating in the air. Then the rocks. Then the giant trees. After that, a giant boulder that he used to climb on as a kid. The screams of people finally registered in his mind when he saw multiple people running out of the park. A villain must be nearby, he thought, turning to Izuku to get him out of there. Only to see his friend floating in mid-air with his hair turned white and his eyes glowing a radioactive green. "Oh, crap," Katsuki said at the state his friend was in. "We have a major situation call. All pro heroes near site report in." Midnight picked up the phone as soon as the message came through. Present Mick and Eraserhead did the same. They all nodded to each other and started heading in the direction of the incident. Eraserhead asked into the intercom, silently cursing whatever it was that caused an interruption between a coffee break. "What is the situation? The boy seems to be about 4 or 5 just activated their quirk. What is the big problem?" Hisashi asked, staring down at his intercom before getting nudged by Namiri. But she exclaimed while pointing at the area of the park, or what used to be. The trees were all uprooted from their spots, rocks and boulders were floating and bumping into each other. Benches were sailing over the heads of civilians, while parked cars hovered sideways around the mess. "What is causing this?" Eraserhead asked, getting agitated by the amount of work he had to do. "This kid has got one serious quirk to deal with." "Not what? Who?" Hisashi asked, getting a good look at which child was at the center of it all. Izawa furrowed his brow at him before focusing more clearly on what troublemaker was causing this. His face paled at the realization. "No." Namiri stared right at the floating boy and yelled out in anguish the name she knew him by. The name she got so used to saying. The title of a person she grew to care deeply about. A boy she loved with all her heart. Her son suspended amongst the wreckage that looked to be in utter pain at the amount of weight he is putting his newly found quirk under. Izuku's quirk. Midnight looked out in horror as she saw her son floating with suspended objects orbiting him. The heroes on the ground were focusing on moving the people out of the way and rescuing people who were stuck on a certain floating tree or in a car. Everyone seemed to be fine, no people were actually being floated unless they were connected to an object. Even the animals were left alone as long as they weren't in the trees or they escaped early. But one children was unaccounted for. Mitsuki shouted, being held back, her husband with a pro hero blocking her way. Masaru tried to calm her while worrying about his son. Midnight looked up to see the Bakugo child holding onto a tree that was closest to Izuku. From the looks of it, he is trying to keep calm and calling out to his friend in the middle of the mess. The elementary school teacher and their group of kids stood by and watched as Izuku wreaked havoc on the park that they visited today as a group. Namiri looked back at her friends. "I'm going to go save my son." Bakugo didn't know how to deal with this. One of his best friends is going out of control with their quirk and they can't stop it. Ever since the trees started to float around them, he has been trying to get Izuku to respond to him. But Izuku couldn't hear him. He couldn't reach him. How was he supposed to save him? He even took hold of the tree to try to help him while everyone else ran away from him. How could he be a hero in the future if he couldn't save him now? Someone, anybody? Where are the pro heroes? Someone help him please. Izuku, wake up please, Katsuki shouted in the direction his friend was floating. Izuku didn't move, his now white curls were flowing with the wind. His radioactive bright green eyes show no movement, they were only looked ahead in a trance. All of the sudden Bakugo was wrapped in a long grey scarf and lifted from his spot on the tree. He fought against the fabric only to land in the hold of Present Mick. "Don't worry. We will get your friend safe soon. My buddies will take care of it." Let me get you out of harm's way first. President Mick said to the fighting toddler. At his words, Bakugo calmed down only to focus his glare on the two heroes going toward Izuku. They better save him or else, he thought with worry as the hero brought him to his parents. Izawa didn't know what to think. One day he is cheering up a kid from being diagnosed quirkless, and then the next day he is trying to save him from his own quirk. The whole park area where he was playing at what is now up in the air with him in the middle of it. It looked like Izuku inherited a mutated and very powerful version of his late mother's telekinesis quirk. All he knew, it was his job to save him. It was his job to save his nephew, and he didn't want to let him down. First, he saved the Bakugo child and swiftly handed him off to President Mick before following the Namuri as she jumped from floating tree to floating rock. With each jump, they got closer to the main center where Izuku was suspended. He was going to erase his quirk when he got close enough to look into Izuku's eyes. Then, Namuri would use her quirk and knock him out. After he goes unconscious, they will clean up the park while Namuri goes home with her boy and makes sure he is okay. The plan was easy, so they got it in motion quickly. Eraser, Namuri shouted to him as his cue. Aizawa nodded as he got up closer to Izuku. Izuku's eyes reacted to the movement. With his telekinesis powers, he floated a billboard straight down where he was and effectively blocked his vision. Aizawa didn't react fast enough and was pulled into a tree prison that Izuku made with his quirk. He wasn't in control of his body or quirk anymore. Damn it, he thought when he tried to escape from his wooden prison, only for it to become smaller. It's up to you, Midnight, he shouted from the confines of his imprisonment. Izuku didn't even react to a familiar face. His body just recognized any kind of movement made in a certain way was hostile, and his quirk reacted to protect him. Namuri thought on her feet when she saw her friend get trapped. His quirk may not recognize who exactly is approaching him, so she needed to try to think quickly. She started by making her way along the outside of the billboard and slowly reaching for her neckline. Midnight pulled an inch of cloth away from her neck, trying to focus on bringing the sleepy gas to him on the other side. Please work, she thought to herself as the billboard started to fidget in place. She peeked around the board to see that Izuku was struggling to stay awake with his hand trying to block his nose from inhaling the gas. It made him stutter for a moment, which is what she needed. She gritted her teeth before trying her last plan. Izuku, honey. Wake up, please. Izuku's bright green eyes tried to refocus on where the voice was coming from, but the fog was affecting his vision. The gas was making him a bit woozy, affecting his hearing. Who was that calling for him? Stop. Please. I don't want anything to happen to you, Midnight said, wiping a tear from her masked face. I have only known you for a short time, but you are my little prince. I can't deal with this. Wake up, please, I love you. Please, wake up. Izuku's eyes started to flicker. The objects floating farthest away started to gently go back to the ground. Namuri noticed and started approaching slowly. Trees began to right themselves back into the ground, rocks started to situate themselves back into their places. Kitsuki watched with his parents behind President Mick at the slowly descending items that were being returned to their proper places. Izuku's white hair started vanishing as his green curls flowed back in from the roots. Namuri rushes just in time to grab Izuku from falling out of the sky. Aizawa dodged away from his wooden trunk prison to go to where his friend and nephew was. Izuku's eyes returned to their normal shade right as he fell into a deep sleep caused by exhaustion. Namuri rested his head on her lap right as Aizawa arrived with President Mick and the Bakugo family on his tail. Is he okay? President Mick asked as Bakugo looked to see his friend resting calmly on the lap of Midnight. He knew that she was his new mom since he and his family watched the interview when it happened. Thankfully, she was there. Does he need to go to the hospital? Masaru asked with his wife holding their son in her arms. He'll be okay. He just needs to rest. Aizawa said looking at Izuku's peaceful face. Namuri brushed a lock of hair out of her little prince's face. His soft breathing fell into rhythm as she gently brushed her fingers through his hair. Thank God he's okay. She thought to herself as the pro-heroes began to fix up the park around them. But that didn't matter to her. She had her son back. Prepping for new school. Midnight was furious. She found out what caused the incident from the words of Bakugo. And she was beyond mad that the school was allowing her son to be bullied because he was quirkless. Oh, she was going to have some words with the principal, and they better hope to whatever god they pray to that their begging skills are top-notch. Or else. That is exactly why she was sitting with Izuku to her left and Bakugo with his father and mother to her right. After the whole incident, the Bakugo family exchanged contact with her to set up more hangout times for the children. Namuri was thankful that young Kitsuki had changed his attitude since she last saw him. She noticed how Kitsuki was protective of Izuku and how he was desperately trying to reach him while the whole crisis was going on. Namuri sat with the Bakugo family while Izuku was getting checked on by Recovery Girl. Kitsuki was considerably upset at not being able to save his friend, but Namuri banished his thoughts. You did well trying to save Izuku. I'm looking forward to seeing you become a hero yourself with Izuku. Make sure to keep your attitude of protection while moving on from now until the future. The intent to save is more important than the intent to win. She explained to Bakugo, who was sitting next to her, angrily wiping at his tears. When Izuku was cleared from recovery girl to just some well-needed rest, everyone sighed in relief. Bakugo automatically went to his side and clung onto him with tears in both their faces. Namuri smiled at the side before being tapped by Mitsuki. She turned to receive a note card with everyone's contact. When she asked why, Mitsuki responded with a gentle smile of her own, matching her husband. Inko was a good friend of mine. I blame myself for not noticing what was going on. I was devastated when I couldn't protect him myself by adopting him into my home. And I would appreciate it if we were able to see Izuku now and then. Mitsuki explained carefully with her husband's hand on her shoulder reassuringly. Namuri nodded and smiled as the three parents watched as the two children hugged onto each other. I won't use my explosions to hurt anymore. I will only use them to save, Bakugo thought to himself while clinging onto the shoulders of his best friend. Namuri received news from recovery girl that Izuku will need some time to recover his strength to use his quirk again if he wished. And when Izuku is better, they will need to get his quirk registered. Nedzu was informed of the doctor that made the wrong diagnosis and saw to it his medical license was suspended until they went back over their necessary quirk education again. But after their license was revoked, they disappeared from the public eye. Nobody has seen him. Midoriya, Izuku and Midnight-san, please come in. Midnight nodded to the Bakugas before guiding Izuku to the office. She sat down as soon as she entered with Izuku sitting in the other chair to her right. So what seems to be the problem? The principal asked from his desk. I have received word from my son and his friend that bullies were the cause of his distressing quirk awakening, Namuri answered with a mean glare directed at him. I see. The principal answered meekly as a sweat drop ran down from his forehead to his neck. So, would you mind explaining how on earth that any bullies were allowed to initiate that kind of behavior? We never have seen any kind of bullying toward young, the principal tried to excuse himself. Oh really? Because Bakugo has been telling me very different stories. Of how the teachers would turn a blind eye and allow it to happen because they picked favorites, Midnight declared very loudly. The principal tried to counter, well, or the fact that no matter if the children used their quirk on my son, they wouldn't report the kids or do anything to send Izuku to the nurse's office. Or the fact that they contributed in the bullying by saying anything that would make the other kids hate him for some reason. Midnight ranted as she glared daggers at the worried principal. But I didn't come here to tell you what you are doing right or wrong. No. Midnight smiled sweetly, plopping down a stack of papers on his desk. You can use any excuse your little mind comes up with in court. Nedzu helped me make this lawsuit actually, so be prepared for anything. The principal freaked out at the things piling against him and his school. Work discrimination being the main one listed on top of all the other offenses. He looked up with freaked out eyes to see the rated 18 pro hero with Izuku in her arms walking out the door. Izuku giggled in her arms with a bright smile on his face as the door closed shut behind them. The court saw the elementary school and the principal guilty. Everyone on faculty was replaced with new teachers that didn't encourage any sort of misbehavior. The principal was a woman that Nedzu appointed from Tokyo that was an excellent leader and worked very well with kids. Bakugo was happy to know that Izuku and anyone like him wouldn't be hurt in the new school, but he was sad. Izuku was getting moved to a more private school. Same Elementary School. Namuri, Izuku's mom, wanted to transfer him to a more private school. Not only because of his past treatment, but also because the public knew who Izuku was. So to make up for the lost time between the two, the parents went to the park to let their kids spend time with each other. So the two friends were sitting by their favorite stream while their parents enjoyed a calm picnic. Mitsuki was informing Midnight about all the memories she had of Izuku and Bakugo's play dates from the past. We are still going to hang out, right? Kitsuki asked Izuku as they swung their feet. I'm not going to be far, Kaken, and we can always hang out during the weekends. Izuku responded with a gentle smile on his face. Yeah, and we will become heroes together, the best hero duo ever, Bakugo said with an excited grin. Izuku replied, yay. The two giggled as the parents watched them play another game. In only a few days until Izuku will be entering into a new school. And the two made the most of it during the weekend by playing an adventure game together. It was a day before Izuku was supposed to go to his new school. Namuri was headed toward the kitchen for a snack of chocolate chip cookies that were hidden in the jar above the fridge. But to her surprise, the jar was no longer on the fridge, but instead on the counter, turned over on its side. She noticed how there was a few cookie crumbs spilling onto the floor. But then she noticed a little thin trail of crumbs leading behind the counter. She smiled when she heard crunching sounds before looking behind to find Izuku on the floor munching. Hey, champ. Namuri greeted with a soft smile aimed at his curly head. Izuku froze and swallowed whatever was in his mouth. Yes. What are you doing? Namuri asked with a hand on her hip. Just sitting on the floor thinking about life, Izuku responded slowly. Oh. That's great, honey. Do you know what happens to the cookie jar? Knew what happened to it. Izuku replied, trying to act innocent with crumbs on his chin. Izuku, did you use your quirk to get a cookie? No. I used it to get 2 cookies. Izuku answered as he held up 2 fingers. Namuri laughed before she swooped up Izuku into her arms. Oh really? Do you know what happens now? What? Tickle monster, she answered with a laugh. Izuku laughed as Namuri attacked his little stomach with tickles. He used his quirk to escape from her tickling grasp and float slowly to the safety of the couch cushions. Namuri followed him to the couch before dragging him back down to her level. She blew a raspberry to his belly, which resulted in him falling into giggles. New school, new friends, same Izuku. Tensei said this was a good place for his little brother to go to, so Izuku must be safer at a place like this, Midnight thought as she guided Izuku into the private school. Izuku agreed to have play dates with Bakugo on the weekends since they couldn't go to the same school anymore. They were sad to part but eagerly awaiting when they would see another again. Right now, Izuku was clinging onto her hand while she walked him inside the unfamiliar territory. I'm nervous. Izuku said honestly to his mother. I understand you might feel a bit nervous. But don't be scared, you might make some fantastic friends here that will last you your lifetime. Like Bakugo will be to you, you might find another best friend. Namuri reassured her son. Izuku calmed down a bit but still held onto a bad feeling of entering a new school with people he didn't know. He asked, what do I do to make friends? Just be yourself. Introduce yourself, be nice and just don't let anyone make you feel sad. But if anyone tries to bully you like the others did, you just tell me and I'll make sure it won't happen ever again. Namuri answered effectively. Izuku giggled slightly and smiled, okay. Namuri returned the smile as they reached his new classroom. She knelt down and started to say her goodbye. I'll see you soon, Izuku. I'll be here to pick you up after work. And then you get to tell me about your first day, okay? Izuku hugged her with all his might and she returned the hug tighter. I'll miss you, but I'll be back sooner than later. Have fun. Alright, Mom. I love you. Love you too, honey. Bye. Namuri replied, turning around to walk back. Bye-bye. Izuku responded right as the homeroom teacher led him in his new homeroom. Oh, hello. You must be Izuku. Nice to meet you, I'm Asani, your new homeroom teacher. Would you like to come in and introduce yourself? His teacher asked, receiving a nod from him. Great, now come on inside. Izuku walked inside to find 20 pairs of eyes staring at him. Hello. My name is Kayama Izuku. Nice to meet you. Hello, the class greeted in unison. The teacher nodded and escorted Izuku to his new seat right next to a girl with a dark ponytail and a boy with glasses. Aoi Rozu and Iida, Kayama will be your new seat buddies starting today. Izuku looked at the teacher's back as she walked away, leaving him alone with his new buddies. Hi, he greeted shyly. Hello Kayama. Welcome to our table, Yaoi Rozu greeted with a gentle smile at him. Greeting, Kayama-kun, Iida responded to him. You can call me Izuku if you want. Izuku offered as he sat down next to his new buddies. Okay, then you can call me Momo if you want. Yaoi Rozu suggested back to him while he got comfortable in his seat. Then, you can call me as Tenya if you wanted. Iida responded as well with a slight blush on his cheeks. Izuku smiled. Maybe this won't be so bad after all, he thought to himself. Soon, it was lunchtime and Izuku was sitting with his 2 new friends. Unbeknownst to them, one kid recognized the new child as being the one under Midnight's care. The villain's kid that caused major damage in the park with his telekinesis quirk. That kid could only spell trouble, so they approached in front of everyone to call him out on it. So, you can create anything if you know the materials in making it. Wow, that sounds so awesome, Izuku complimented Momo, who looked a little red at his praising. Tenya was about to tell Izuku to keep his volume down when the newcomer approached. Hey, you that kid whose dad is the villain, right? Why the hell are you here? The mean kid asked the stunned Izuku. Izuku started, utterly panicking on the inside. And aren't you the one who caused all that damage that lasted a few days to fix? Hey, that's our friend you are talking about. Tenya stood up and reprimanded the stranger. And it wasn't his fault he caused that damage. It was the first time his quirk ignited and he didn't know how to control it. Momo responded while Izuku watched on. And so what? I don't care that his father was a bad person. That doesn't make him bad. Tenya retorted, giving Izuku a kind smile. Momo added with a slight glare to her eyes. Yeah. He has been nothing but a kind sweetheart to us since we met him. Before the mean kid could say anything else, Izuku's homeroom teacher, Asani, approached him and led him away to the principal's office. When he tried to protest, she said, there will be none of that in this school. No discrimination or bullying will take place under my watch. Izuku apologized that they had to deal with that person because of him, but they both shook their heads. We are friends now, correct? And friends stuck up for each other. Tenya said softly while Momo gave a big grin. Tenya cleaned up his glasses with his handkerchief after he finished what he was saying. Momo added, yeah, and don't mind what he said to you at all. But my dad is a villain, and I did cause all that damage. Izuku started to doubt. But that wasn't your fault at all. Tenya argued back, placing his glasses on again. It wasn't. He asked quietly, mostly to himself. No, you couldn't have stopped it from happening. Momo said gently at her new friend. Okay. Thanks for cheering me up, Ten-chan and Momo-chan. Izuku answered back at them, causing them both to blush at their new nicknames. Mom, Izuku yelled out, running to his mother in her casual wear. Izuku, how was your day? Namuri asked, straight from her last patter. It was great, I made 2 new friends. Izuku responded with a big smile that held all his excitement to talk about his first day. Smiling, Namuri replied, that's great, I'm so happy that you made some friends. Namuri. A voice called out from behind her. Tensei? Namuri asked, seeing her friend's face. Izuku recognized a familiar figure standing behind the new stranger, Ten-chan. Izuku? Tenya questioned at seeing a face he just met that day. Wow, you guys have already met, huh? Well, I'm glad since I was going to introduce you to my little brother soon anyway. And look at that, you are already friends, Tensei said, scratching at the back of his neck before turning to Namuri. Namuri smiled at her friend before hearing a girl's voice from behind her. The 2 friends looked at each other before turning around to see Momo approach with her nanny behind her. Namuri smiled at him. I'm glad he found some new friend, she thought as she watched her son talk to his peers. Itachi enters stage left as Izuku's cousin. Namuri smiled when she saw that Izuku's eyes were closed. It seems like the bedtime story worked. Izuku was lying down comfortably in his soft bed with his face serene, having dreams of joining his mother in her work as her sidekick. She lightly kissed his forehead goodnight before exiting his room. Katana heading to her room, but before she could make it to her comfy bed, her phone vibrated. She raised an eyebrow as she took the shaking phone into her hands to answer whoever was calling. What does Hisashi need at this time of night? She thought to herself as she swiped to answer the call. Hey, Hisashi, what's up? Namuri asked in greeting. Hi. I have some news, Hisashi started, sounding off especially with his voice sounding like there is an echo. What is it? Namuri asked, sitting down on her bed. Hisashi sighed before telling her the news. Eraserhead and I are adopting a little boy. He is in the hospital right now with us getting checked out. Wait, what? When did you guys decide to adopt a kid? What happened? She asked, her eyes widened at the sudden announcement. Well, when I was working on my radio show, Azawa checked out an orphanage that he got a tip on while he worked his late-night patrol. Apparently there was an orphanage near Hosu where some caretakers aren't really doing their jobs and are actually dealing with the bad side of things in the underground network. So he went in with backup on the way just to apprehend the horrible caretakers, right? Namuri asked, making sure Azawa didn't do something reckless. He did. The backup was in the way to his location as soon as he entered the building. But he got to a certain room hidden under all the pretend. There was Hisashi paused, taking in a shaky breath. What is it? What was wrong? She implored, trying to avoid her friend bursting into tears. There was an attic room where they kept a poor kid in a muzzle. His quirk has something to do with him talking, but they branded him as a villain kid and forced him into it. They never allowed him to take it off unless he was sleeping, eating, or bathing. They never allowed him to live his life happily without it, Hisashi sniffled, trying to compose himself. Oh no. Namuri raised a hand up to her mouth. He rescued the kid and apparently the little listener knew who he was. I think it was adorable when Izawa told me, he blushed and everything. Hisashi chuckled, remembering Shouda's reddened face when he told him about that little scene. She furrowed her brows. Well, what happened to the other children there? After the police took the caretakers away, the rest of the orphan kids were transferred over to a safer location. Azawa helped the kid get the muzzle off before escorting him to the hospital personally because he saw a lot of bruises and cuts, and Hisashi started sniffling. Whoa, hey. It's okay now, right? He is safe now, he is out of there. Yeah, Hisashi sniffled, he didn't deserve that kind of treatment, he is so nice. He acted shy around me, but when he opened up he told me all about how he loved the cookie he had for dessert, and I know what you mean, Namuri said, looking back at the room where Izuku was sleeping soundly. So you guys are adopting him? Yes. He deserves a better life, more than that place could have ever given him. He does, and what better way that to live with you 2 lovebirds. I'm sure he will be very happy in his new family. She reassured her friend as they continued their conversation. Before Hisashi could respond, the phone was shuffled a bit when a deeper voice came on. You did this. You caused me to have more of a soft spot for kids. That is not my fault, you always had a soft spot for kids, Izuku just made it more obvious, Shouda. Azawa sighed, the paperwork will be done soon, so we can take him into our custody before we are granted full rights to him. Maybe when everything is settled, he can meet his new cousin. Yeah, I'm sure Izuku will be so happy to meet his cousin. But take your time, I don't want to force the little guy into anything. Namuri added with a smile, not noticing her door creak open a bit. Okay, I'll update you soon on how it comes along, have a nice night Namuri. Aizawa retorted when a loud-sounding good night came from Hisashi over the speaker. You too, Namuri added before hanging up her phone. She has tying her hair up in a ponytail when her door creaked open to reveal a curly bush of green hair. I have a cousin. She questioned her son as soon as she saw his awake and adorable face. Izuku, what are you doing up so late? Mama said that I have a cousin. Do I? Izuku asked, approaching her bedside. She sighed and picked him up to sit next to her. She directed the next words at him, yes, but it might take a while for you to meet them, they have to get over some obstacles in their life right now. Okay, but when they finally come over, I'll make sure we are best buds, Izuku promised with a determined look on his face. Yeah, you go and do that. After you go back to bed. Namuri urged her son. Can I sleep here? Izuku pleaded shyly, twisting the bottom of his shirt in his hands. She rolled her eyes fondly at her son, okay, my little prince. Izuku cheered as he snuggled up to the many comfortable throw pillows she had stacked on her bed. After a month, Hitachi was finally comfortable enough to see who his cousin was. Namuri got constant updates from Hisashi that consisted of what his favorite color was and what he liked to eat. The updates with his adoption, healing and rehabilitation process was relayed to her shortly by Aizawa when he had the time to detail her in. Everything was apparently going great with taking care of Hitachi. Hitachi was at first shy with them and was surprised he had a room all to himself that was nothing like the dark and scary one he lived in before. It took a long time for him to be fully comfortable to be able to hold a conversation with them, but now he talks to them each day. And thank goodness everything worked out. Hitachi was coming to her apartment to meet his cousin with Hisashi and Aizawa in tow. So Yamada Aizawa Hitachi was coming here to meet his cousin who he has never met before. A knock at the door proved that maybe she should have been paying more attention to time than she was. She silently cursed before heading to the door to allow her guests in. Aizawa stood there hand in hand with Hisashi. Both of their hair was down. Hisashi long straight blonde hair cascading down his back while Aizawa's wavy black hair came down right under his shoulders. Hitachi stood there in the middle of both of them with his purple hair poofed up. Hi there, Nem. Hitachi, this is our friend Namuri. Namuri, this is our son and your nephew, Hitachi, Hisashi introduced. Hi. Nice to finally meet you. I've been friends with your dads for a long time. Namuri greeted with a kind smile. Hitachi nodded, looking up at her with a hint of hesitancy in his eyes. Namuri thought of an idea to make him more open to her. She smirked, don't worry. I'll tell you all their secret stories with them making fools of themselves. There was this one time. Okay, that's enough. Aizawa stopped her from continuing, but she had already gained what she had been looking for. A small smile from the child that held in a fit of laughter, his eyes more welcoming to her presence. I'll tell you later, she whispered to him as the three entered her home. Hitachi nodded with an excited look on his face. Hitachi entered the living room, but shrunk back at the sight of Izuku watching hero fights in television. Izuku looked up to see his cousin standing there, he brightened up with a smile that confused the heck out of Hitachi. Hi, I'm Izuku. I'm your cousin. Izuku greeted his cousin who stepped back as the excited child approached him. Hello. I'm Hitachi. Hitachi shyly answered as his cousin looked very happy at his presence. He was very surprised that he was acting this way, he never expected that anyone would actually be this happy to see him. Yeah, I'm so glad I get to meet you. I've never had a cousin before, so I want to make sure I'm the bestest cousin ever. Do you want to play heroes? We can be the heroes who defeat the bad guy. Izuku replied, his eyes twinkling with enthusiasm. You aren't going to make me be the villain? Hitachi questioned with surprise very evident in his voice. No, we can be the heroes, I'll be Midnight and you can be Eraserhead, and we can defeat the villain named Hammerhead. Izuku responded with a smile as he picked up the action figures. Oh, okay, Hitachi said hesitantly, taking his favorite hero action figure in his hands to play with his new cousin. He had hoped that Izuku is actually different from the rest and will treat him like he always wished someone would. Since he got away from that dark place, his parents showed him that people can actually be nice. Izuku swiped down with his midnight doll at the upright villain doll that stood upright on the living room table, while Hitachi messed with the yellow glasses of his figure. The three friends watched as the two got along. They seemed to be doing just fine. Aizawa commented before taking a sip of his coffee that Midnight brewed just for him. Hisashi breathed out his relief, thank goodness, I knew Izuku would break through Hitashi's shy barrier. Namuri giggled as she watched Hitachi take down the villain with Izuku supporting cheers, I can't wait until they both starts begging to see their cousin again. Oof, I'm already planning the play dates. Hisashi said, aiming a smug grin towards Shouta. Ugh, Aizawa sighed into his coffee cup, earning cheerful laughs from his friend Namuri and his partner, Hisashi. The two cousins looked over to see the three adults laughing amongst themselves in the kitchen. They shrugged and laughed together. "I'm so happy that I got to meet you," Shai-chan Izuku said as they held onto their action figures. "Yeah, me too," Hitachi agreed, looking into the very enthusiastic eyes of his green-haired cousin. "I want to do this again." Izuku's birthday party. Namuri was glad that Izuku was feeling happier. His therapist said that Izuku no longer has any horrible nightmare about that night. Tenya and Momo are wonderful friends. Hitachi is becoming even more comfortable around him and around other people as well. Bakugo gets to meet up with him when both mothers are free. Everything was going amazing. And now, it is time for Izuku's 5th birthday. Hard to believe, but her little prince was growing up. And with that, he is going to have the best birthday party. Okay. Cake. Check. Balloon. Check. Invites to everyone. Check. Presents. Check. Namuri muttered to herself, pointing out each thing she had concealed in her room. The guests should be arriving very soon, and Izuku is so excited. She laughed, remembering when he woke up this morning that he couldn't decide what to wear to welcome everybody. She helped him pick out a white shirt and purple shorts. He decided to wear his trusty red pair of shoes with the outfit, since then I can look more like mama. She smiled when she realized that. Yes, the white shirts could definitely be the fabric that rips away easily. Then his purple shorts can definitely be her hair and a little bit of the black in her outfit, since it was a very dark shade of purple. Then the red could be the accents her hero costume has. It was lovely to think that he wants to be like her. She ruffled his hair, eliciting giggles from the small boy. She was surprised when he carefully floated himself up fast to her face. He dived in for a hug that she was glad to give. He smiled into her neck. "I'm glad you are finally getting used to your quirk." "It took a while," Hyle Midnight commented, squeezing him tight against her. It took a really long time to have Izuku more comfortable trying to train his quirk. He was so frightened that something like the park incident would happen again. "I don't want to hurt anyone," he cried out when she asked why he didn't use his quirk that often. With some help and encouragement from her and his uncles, Izuku gained enough trust in himself to start learning how to work his powerful quirk. Well, he just liked to float up to things and float things towards himself right now. And that was fine. It made her day to see him try to sneak more cookies out of the jar when they were in really high places. Speaking of, she should try hiding the jar more secretively. But the knocking at the door disrupted her thoughts of hiding the jar in her own bedroom. She smiled before she turned to Izuku, who was still resting his head on her shoulder. "Let's go greet the guests, shall we?" "Yay," Izuku replied happily as she walked him to the front door. She casually strolled up with a happy toddler on her shoulder as she opened the door to reveal the Bakugo family. "Oh hello, nice to see you three so early." Itsuki smirked happily, strolling into the apartment very excited. "Yeah, nice to see you too. It took us forever to find out where to go, but we found it." "Hello. Thanks for inviting us." Masaru greeted, bending into small bow. Izuku Kitsuki called out to his friend who was out of hug attack range. Hakan Izuku yelled out happily, floating down to land into his friend's arms. "Yeah, you're here." "Of course I'm the bestest friend," Kaken gloated, tightening his hold on his friend. "I got you the best gift." "I just like that you're here, thanks for coming, Kaken." Izuku replied, smiling brightly. "HMPH. It's no problem." Kitsuki proudly explained, glad that he made Izuku happy. Another knock at the door proved to be Izuku's uncles with his two cousins. "Ten-chan, Shai-chan," Izuku yelled out. Izuku Tenya rushed forward straight into a hug with his friend. "Aizu." Hitachi called out shyly, walking forward after the fast blue-haired toddler. His purple hair a mess of waves. He waited patiently until he received his own hug. "What, no hug for the uncles?" Hisashi teasingly complained, holding out his arms for Izuku. "Uncles, ah well, Uncle Mick, Uncle Ten," Izuku shouted before focusing his quirk to float fast into their arms for big uncle hug. "Yay, almost everybody is here." "Yes, Momo should be here soon, the traffic is running a little long. Her nanny texted me ahead of time they might be a little longer." Namuri explained, messing with her long hair to put it into a messy bun. "Well, let's begin the party," Namuri said, making all the small children cheer in joy. First up on the party list was a game of chutes and ladders. And after Hitachi had won, the next was Candyland. Izuku was just a fan of looking at the background of the make-believe land made of candy. "I wish it were real," Izuku mumbled, especially looking at the cotton candy. "Me too." Kitsuki muttered angrily, mad that it doesn't exist. Tenya and Hitachi nodded in agreement. Namuri silently watched with her friend and Bakugo's parents until she heard a knock at the door. She excused herself from the adult guests to answer it. The door opened to Momo dressed in a really flowery sundress with her nanny carrying two big boxes labeled for Izuku. "Hello," Momo greeted excitedly with a smile. Her Annie bowed slightly, letting Namuri take the presents from her arms to place them with the rest of the presents in his room. "Hello, Miss Yaoi Rozu," Namuri greeted, holding the presents in her arms. "It's okay. You can call me Momo," Momo exclaimed, walking into the apartment. Okay, Momo. Izuku is in the living room playing some games with his friends. Go ahead and join in for the next round of Connect 4. Namuri said, allowing the nanny to walk in and gestured a seat in the living room where the other adults were sitting. The small friends played more games until Namuri announced it was time for cake. Izuku and his friends gathered around the kitchen table to see a large container of vanilla ice cream next to a chocolate and vanilla two-tier cake. It was a small two-tier cake with green and white icing and decorated with small depiction of heroes. Izuku was so ecstatic he just started swaying in a happy dance. Momo giggles at the happy dance, following behind the others. Bakugo went for the chocolate cake with Hitachi, while Izuku went for the vanilla cake with Tenya and Momo. Safe to say, they were fully stuffed with the cake and the additional ice cream scoop given. Okay, present time, Namuri announced, her friends watching her with a smile. Mitsuki went to help her with bringing the gifts out into the living room for Izuku to unwrap. Izuku clapped as Mitsuki placed the first small present down in front of him. Those one is from Uncle Masaru. Izuku smiled as he ripped open the package to show a handmade patchwork cape and mask to play heroes with. The cape has so many small scraps of fabric all sewn together in an elegant cape made for a hero. The mask matched the cape with its perfectly sewn stitches. I hope you like it, Masaru responded with a gentle smile. In return, Izuku went to hug him by floating as fast he could into his warm arms. Izuku gladly put on the patchwork cape of many patterns, but saved the mask until later. With the gift to start, he eagerly opened the other gifts to have similar reactions of hugging to each person respectfully. Mitsuki gave him several small action figures of some of his favorite heroes. She was so ready to give him his tight hug when he floated over to her. Mitsuki proudly walked up with his own gift with a red blush across his cheeks in anticipation. He thrusted the gift out to Izuku, which was gently taken from his hands to be ripped open in a similar fashion. Izuku almost started crying happy tears when he saw that not only All Might but also Midnight Odysseys were inside. Tenya gifted him several books that he loved to read and hoped that Izuku would love as much as him. Izuku was very excited about a picture book on the recent top 10 heroes. Tenya was giggling when Izuku gave up on the floating to rush his cousin into a surprisingly soft bear hug. Tensei got him a giant coloring book with one of those large boxes of crayons with a sharpener at the back. Izuku had never been so excited to color in his life. Tensei laughed as he got a big hug from a smiling Izuku. Shota gifted him a similar scarf to his own that was long and dragged on the ground. When Namuri questioned, he pointed out that Izuku's quirk would benefit greatly from the support item. Plus, it is soft, so I think he will like it, Shota said, gesturing to a sparkly-eyed Izuku who put it on immediately over the patchwork cape. Azashi got him 4 hoodies for each of his favorite family members who were heroes. Present Mick, Midnight, and Ingenium hoodies were pulled out to show off their beautiful color scheme and pattern. An Eraserhead hoodie was a custom order that was a surprise on the bottom. Izuku made sure to hug him tightly enough for his Ashi to slightly choke on air, which made Shota laugh. Itachi shyly handed over his small gift for Izuku to open. He had gotten him a very soft blanket with a hood that had many cats patterned on it. Hitachi giggles when Izuku put it on over his cape and scarf and hugged him. It was a very warm hug between cousins. Momo was very excited to show him the mountain of tea she had gotten for him. It all came with a tea set with his mother, Midnight depicted on the teapot, and he was on the teacup. Namuri loved the gift since her and her son's little drawings were very cute since they were chibi. Izuku was very glad to hug her in a very tight friend embrace that caused her to laugh. Namuri gave her his last present, which was from her. It was weird since it had holes on the top, but he didn't judge it. He smiled as he took off the top only to receive a large ball of fur jumping up to his face. The puppy Izuku yelled out, picking up the tiny dog into his arms, laughing as the small dog licked the freckles on his face. The rest of the kids awed in shock as they saw an adorable puppy with a red collar around their fluffy light brown fur. It's a golden doodle. Namuri remarked to her surprised guests. She was so sweet. I couldn't help it. Plus, she can watch over him. The guests watched as Izuku was full of smiles as the little puppy danced around him on the floor. Namuri smiled, watching her son smile. She asked, what's her name? Izuku paused, keeping a grin on his face as he looked at his new fluffy friend, Miku. Late date with Kaken. Izuku was sitting besides Tenya and Momo while they all got out their packed lunch. Izuku had his leftovers from last night, a bottle of water and a little pastry. Tenya had a sandwich, orange juice and hard caramel candy. Momo had a double-layer bento filled with rice, sushi, and veggies with a small thermos filled with apple juice. The math test was harder today than usual. Izuku brought up to his friends. Tenya chuckled, I have to admit it was more difficult than it has been the last few times. He took a refreshing sip of orange juice from his lunch. You guys need help. I would love to help out my friends. You can come to my house whenever the next text is, and I can tutor you, both Momo excitedly offered. Stars almost seemed to float around her as she smiled brightly. Tenya's face lightened up, that sounds like a wonderful idea. Awesome, we can hang out with apple snacks. Izuku said in total support of the idea. Yes, Momo celebrated, fist pumping into the air before returning back down to her bento. Onto another topic, what are you guys planning to do this weekend? Izuku asked, twisting open the cap off his bottle to take a sip from. Tenya grew excited about his upcoming plans. Oh, I'm planning to go with my brother and mother to check out a new exhibit on heroes in a museum I have been dying to see. Momo replied, I'm going to visit a tea garden with my mother and father. How about you, Izuku? I'm going to have a playdate with Kaken on Saturday. I think we are going to the mall with our moms. I have a feeling it's going to be unforgettable. Izuku ended his answer with a huge smile before digging into the leftover katsudon his mom made for dinner last night. I'm so glad we had time today to let our sons have a playdate. This way we get to chat a little bit more, Mitsuki said, walking with Namuri. Mitsuki was dressed in her usual cardigan against a white shirt, but she had on her favorite pair of jeans just for today. Oh yes, it is so nice to have a day off from work. Namuri replied back, adjusting her long black hair into a bun. She was dressed casually in a dark purple sleeveless turtleneck and a pair of dark denim jeans. Mitsuki groaned, you're telling me this one client I had wanted this beehive in less than 20 minutes, how the hell was I supposed to do that in such a short time? Big beehive styles take at least an hour to do. So what did you do? Namuri asked curiously. I did it even with a huge time crunch. Mitsuki shrugged, it took a lot of teasing, but I could get it to a stable height in the amount of time she wanted. It wasn't as high as she liked it to be, but I told her to her face that if she wanted a bigger height, she should have come in earlier or at least given me more time to work with. Namuri nodded her head, I agree. Every time I have an appointment like that I always show up at least 20 minutes before just in case. Smart. Mitsuki commented, giving a nod of approval. Also, great choice on picking them all. Well, I needed to get some shopping done for Izuku in the house, so might as well kill two birds with one stone. Namuri commented. What? Not the birdies, Izuku whispered, fearing for the little birds. Mitsuki rolled his eyes, it's a figure of speech. Nothing will happen to any birds. Promise? Izuku looked at his best friend with sad eyes. Mitsuki nodded with a smirk, I promise. Now hurry up, I heard the hero store has a new stuff. Yeah, I wonder if Mama's stuff is in there. Izuku mumbled as Katsuki ran slightly ahead of him. Heiak smiled down at her son fondly, honey, you don't need to buy many of my stuff here, I can just get you that if you really want it. Really? Izuku asked, completely forgetting that she could. Yeah. Namuri nodded. Izuku smiled in response, okay yay. Come on, Zuku, Katsuki called back over his shoulder. Izuku sped up to his blonde friend, coming, Kaken. Kaken and Izuku chased after one another under the watchful eyes of their mothers. They shook their head fondly and started to exchange small memories of embarrassing moments that the boys had. One of them being that Katsuki was too embarrassed to admit that he thought sharks were a bit scary since he thought it wouldn't make him tough. Which led to another story of how Kayama has to hide her favorite snack from the kitchen or else Izuku would float them down to his height to swipe some. The group of four headed into the mall, but before the two little boys could run immediately to the store they wanted to go to the most, Miss Mitsuki stopped them. Hey, wait a minute. Mitsuki stated, bringing attention to her. Mitsuki sputtered, what? Why? I'm just going to lay down the plan. Our first stop is the home outlet, then the clothing store, the hero store, and afterwards we should get lunch at the food court. Everyone good? Mitsuki explained, making sure everyone knew the game plan. Yes. A resounding sound of agreement came from the other three present. Good. Now let's hop to it. Mitsuki replied with a smile. Against better judgment, Izuku took little hops before Katsuki corrected him to say that it was another figure of speech. With that, the first stop was the home outlet that sold all kinds of decor and antiques that Namuri found very interesting. Izuku followed after the two mothers, while Katsuki got a little bored of all the looking around, but never picking anything up. After what seemed like hours in little Katsuki's brain, the two mothers picked out some lovely decor for their homes. Mitsuki bought for an intricate red and bronze stitched rug, and Namuri bought a dark blue flower painting for her room. While the group of four was walking out of the store, there was a huge commotion of people traveling from one side to the other, and vice versa. It was chaotic how many people were passing by. The two friends stuck to their mothers' backs, but with the endless amount of people pushing their way, Izuku got tripped over. Ow, Zuku, Katsuki called out, taking his eyes off his mother's fading back to drag his friend up on his feet. Wait. Where did they go? Huh? Izuku asked, turning back to see that he lost sight of his mom. Mama. Mama, but it was no use, the overwhelming sound of chatter from all around him blocked his voice from his mother. It's fine. Everything is going to be okay. Let's just get out of this mess of people so I can finally see where the hell we are. Katsuki said, taking Izuku's hand. The two friends helped each other expertly move out of the way of people's way. Well, more like Izuku dragging Katsuki away before he blew sparks at people's ankles. What now? Izuku asked his friend. Alright. They said they are going to the clothing store. Katsuki stated. Right, so we just go there before them. Izuku said before blanching when he remembered how big the mall could be. How many clothing stores are in here? Katsuki looked at Izuku to the mall map on the wall for a few moments before looking back to him. 17 different clothing stores. Are you serious? How are we supposed to know which one? Izuku asked, looking shocked by how many there were. Okay. Since we don't know which one. Katsuki started saying, thinking about what to do next. We go to all of them? Izuku questioned curiously, knowing surely that couldn't be the answer. Katsuki explained, no, that would waste so much time. We go to the final stop that they planned and wait there for them to show up. Simple as that. We go to the hero store and wait for them? Izuku questioned, trying to confirm the plan. Yep. Now let's go. Katsuki nodded in confirmation. He made sure to take Izuku's hand in a tight grip to not lose him. Man, there was a lot of people trying to push past us. Nomuri smiled to her friend. Yeah, geez, at least we got out of there. Mitsuki returned the smile with a smirk. Yeah. Right, Izuku. Izuku. Nomuri's smile dropped as she noticed her little bowl of sunshine was nowhere to be seen. Brat. Katsuki. Mitsuki shouted out for her son. Oh no, we must have gotten separated in the crowd. Nomuri replied, starting to get worried about Izuku. Okay, let's not panic. I taught my son what to do in these sort of situation. If we were ever separated, go to the place I told you we would go next. Which would be the clothing store. Mitsuki replied, trying to calm her friend. Right. Got it. Let's go. Nomuri said, following Mitsuki's lead on this. Izuku and Katsuki had been waiting in the Hero Mercy store for about 30 minutes now. They did spend some time looking around, hoping that their mothers would come at any second. At least they had some fun looking at the new additions of heroes that came onto the scene. But still, even Katsuki was started to get worried, and he never got worried. What are we going to do? Katsuki whispered before he saw Izuku rush out of the shop. What? Izuku. Uncle's Awa Izuku shouted, hugging the leg of the underground hero who was dressed in sweats. Izuku? What are you doing here? Azawa questioned, looking shocked to see his nephew come out of nowhere. We got separated from our moms, so we came over here and waited for them to show up. But they are taking a long time. Katsuki. Azawa raised a brow, why didn't you ask for a phone to call them? Don't talk to strangers. Katsuki replied. One moment. Let me call Nomuri and let her know where you two are. Azawa sighed, getting his cell phone out of his pocket. Thank you, Izuku replied happily. How long have we been waiting for? Mitsuki asked, pacing back and forth. About 30 minutes. Nomuri responded, taking a nervous look at her watch. She was aching to just unleash her quirk to make her find her son much more easier among the sea of people in the mall. I don't understand, I told him we would be at the clothing store next. Mitsuki grumbled. Do you specify which one? Kayama asked, trying to remember the sequence that Mitsuki said at the beginning. Mitsuki blanked, oh hell. I forgot there is like 20 stores here that sell clothing. No wonder, that means they must be at that hero shop they wanted to go to. Let's head there and… Nomuri's phone went off. She picked it up right away and was slightly surprised when she saw that Azawa was calling. Shota. What? I hear you are missing 2 children. I have them. Azawa replied. You found them? Nomuri asked, her hand gripping the phone. Yeah, I brought them to the food court. Azawa responded. Oh my goodness, thank you. We will be there really quick. Nomuri ended the phone call. Izuku's uncle is looking after them. They are at the food court. Mitsuki nodded before following Nomuri out the store. Mama, Izuku shouted out, getting out of his seat easily to run to his mother. Izuku, Nomuri greeted, welcoming the green-haired boy into her arms. Oh my, don't scare me like that. I was almost going to making everyone fall asleep to find you faster. Brat, Mitsuki yelled out, scooping her son into a tight hug before he could respond. Thanks, Shota. Nomuri said to her friend who sat at the table watching the encounter. No problem, but maybe consider a little starter phone for him just to make calls just in case something like this happen again. Azawa suggested, taking a sip of coffee. Nomuri nods, smiling while holding her son close. Izuku smiled against her shoulder before looking towards Kaken, who had a smirk. This would be one unforgettable play date out of the many to follow. Halloween. Midnight was glad she took off Halloween. She pulled down her green dress to go down to her knees a little more. She pulled back her hair flyaways into a bun before fixing up her sparkly wings on her back. She was Tinkerbell for tonight and she was ready for it. She had prepared a special pouch of sparkly glitter of pixie dust to throw at people who didn't believe in fairies. Mama, is my hat on right? Izuku came through the open door of her bedroom for her to check. He had it on backwards with the feather facing the wrong way and it was way too low on his face. Izuku's Peter Pan costume was a green tunic with torn edges at the end. His brown legging pants really helped sell the look. He had on a dark green belt with a plastic sword in one of the pockets. He had little brown shoes on that were great for running around in. But the thing that smelled the youthful character the most was his bright smile. Namuri hid her laugh behind her hand as she fixed his hat. "Well, now it is Izuku. Thank you, mama." Izuku smiled happily, using his telekinesis to fix up his feather in his hat a bit higher. Namuri pulled down his hat much to his enjoyment as he laughed. Itsuki appeared in the doorway. "When are we going?" Namuri checked the time. "In about 5 more minutes. Just wait a little longer." "Okay, I guess," Kitsuki retorted before turning back to return into the living room. She was also excited for Halloween since she will be looking after Izuku and his friends. Kitsuki, Momo, Tenya and Hitachi were all ready to come trick-or-treating with them. Kitsuki was dressed as a werewolf in little fluffy ears and tail clipped onto the back of jeans. He wore a fluffy jacket that was nice for the fall weather with a furry collar and inside of the hood. He had on a red collar necklace that had spikes on it. His mother thought it was a lovely addition because she was laughing so hard at her adorable son's costume when she dropped him off for the night to sleep over. Momo was dressed in a doctor's scrubs with a long white doctor coat and a stethoscope she made herself. Her white lab coat sort of dragged on the ground with the long sleeves almost engulfing her hands. Tenya was Frankenstein with 2 large foam bolts on his neck and a big screw through his head. He took a more artistic view on Frankenstein with a few more details than the classic. He had stitches painted on his skin, and in certain places his skin was painted blue and purple. Itachi was a zombie covered in painted scars and stitches. His jeans were torn at the knees to really sell the looks, especially with the plaid patches near the end of the legs. His dark t-shirt looked on purposely dirty sell the look, but thankfully it wasn't realistic with the smell of the undead. He even had a little face mask that had embroidered shark teeth smile to paint a picture of a hungry zombie. Miku was ready to celebrate as well with her best nanny costume from Peter Pan. She had a little bonnet tied around her fluffy head. A light blue lacy bow around her collar to further illustrate her character. "Can we go yet?" Bakugo moaned, throwing his head back to look at the ceiling. "Are you excited?" "Goodness, I surely can't," Momo exclaimed, happily clutching her stethoscope between her hands. A glimmer in her eyes as she looked into the distance while smiling. "Yeah," Hitachi said quietly. His fluffed up his hair right before Tenya came up to the two of them. "Hello," Auntie Tenya said, looking up to find his aunt and cousin coming out from the bedroom. Namuri asked, giving the kids their pumpkin head candy baskets. "Everyone ready?" Yes, is it time to go now?" Bakugo yelled, asking in excitement. Namuri nods. "Yep, let's head out everybody." The kids cheered as Namuri ushered them out the front door to start their night of trick-or-treating. Namuri thought it was best to do heroes that the kids might not know, but that didn't stop Izuku from recognizing almost everyone. But the pro heroes they were taking them to were placed around in separate places. Instead of walking the neighborhood, Namuri got them all in her car to drive them around the late afternoon to their houses and companies. Backdraft's house was decorated mostly with toilet as some gag my mummy wrappings. He gave out lollipops to the children while dressed as the mummy-wrapped pharaoh when he opened the door. Ryukyu's house had red lanterns decorating the outside, but she had many jack-o'-lanterns placed all around her front porch. She was dressed in a dragon odyssey while giving the kids some gummy worms. Airjet's house was simply decorated with some spooky inflatables in his yard. Hitachi really loved Black Cat with a multicolored witch's hat near the front steps. He came out dressed as an astronaut to give the children one of those huge popcorn balls that are pretty hard to bite into. Enigma's company lobby was decorated more alien than creepy monster. It was filled with light holographic alien green-colored UFOs and antennas. His costume was a pair of alien antennas sticking up from his head. He reached into his bowl which was leaking out the smoke from dry ice as he handed out taffy to the costume troublemakers. When they got to Gunhead's company, he was wearing a martial arts master uniform. He tiptoed over to his candy bowl to hand out popular chocolate sticks to the kids who were very appreciative. Ms. Joke opened the door of her company wide with a very loud laugh. Her laugh was contagious to the other kids, even though her clown costume was pretty lame. She gave out fun-size candy bars to all the kids. Midnight got out of their fire. She started asking about Eraserhead. Selkie's company lobby was decorated with pirate skeletons, and mermaid skeletons are positioned in certain ways to portray a story. There was a fake treasure chest filled with chocolate gold coins. He traveled over with his pirate captain costume, complete with an eye patch over his eye to give them a scary cute face. Izuku giggled as Selkie emptied some doubloons into his pumpkin head. Itachi hid his scared face from Selkie's surprised scary face that Izuku says was his way of being cute. Bakugo gave him a deadpan look as they walked away, really questioning how that face he made was cute. Bang Orca's company was really big since he had so many sidekick henchmen by his side. His sidekicks opened the door to give the gathered children a big handful of assorted candies, mixed in a huge bowl. Namuri did a few more houses from a few sidekicks that she knew a bit more personally. Then, she opted to get a stop at a few houses that belonged to normal citizens around the same place as her apartment. She stopped for gas between the stops, letting the children eat some of their candy hoard. But when she started hearing the yawns of the children, especially seeing Tenya's barely awake eyes, she thought it was best to head back home. She smiled fondly at the kids from her rearview mirror as she drove away from the last house. The children walked back inside Midnight's apartment with sleepy smiles as they put aside their candy buckets for the night. After they gather a few candies for snacking, they all sat down on the couch to snuggle under a huge quilted blanket. Midnight smiled as she dimmed the lights, letting the kids watch a special about a Halloween godmother as she prepared the futons. The children finished the first special fine, but near the end of th second special, they were all lying down on the futons barely staying awake. Namuri giggled as she sipped on her warm tea, sleepy. What? No. I'm not tired, I'm just resting my eyes. Bakugo answered back, rubbing his eyes with a yawn. Namuri replied, laying him back down after fluffing his little pillow. His not sleepy argument broke through when she tucked him in next to a peacefully sleeping Izuku. With the warmth of his best friend next to him, Bakugo quickly fell asleep. Namuri looked over to see Hitachi basically sleeping on top of Tenya's stomach as Momo slept with her head on Tenya's shoulder. Tenya, himself, was sleeping soundly with a little snot bubble, rhythmically moving with his breaths. Namuri smiled at the sleeping children before turning off the televisions as the end credits rolled for the special. She curled up on the couch with a blanket and pillow to watch over the kids. She still couldn't believe that her life became like this. She always thought she was just going to stay single, but now here she was with a son. And she had little nephews and a niece to be part of her family. Namuri quickly fell asleep with the image of Izuku standing next to her with his friends by his side as they saved the world as heroes. Izuku and Tenya meet Shoto. Aizawa watched the children off to the side as they ran around a duck pond in the park. He remembers the exact moment he had offered to train the kids at an easy pace to let them grow into well-respected heroes. It was only 2 weeks ago when they were all having a playdate at Midnight's apartment and he was there to watch over Hitachi. Aizawa noticed how each of the children looked so excited to be heroes, so he offered to give them a hand in their training. They had all agreed and their guardians were okay with it as long as the kids were safe. And Aizawa made sure to keep the kids at a nice pace since they were still very young. The only thing they would be training would just be basic exercises that the children would get in a regular physical exercise class until they are old enough to advance their training. He had them do some running, jogging, walking, sit-ups, and other small exercises that didn't really cause any danger to them since all of the PM were only around 5 or 6. Come on, listeners, break time for cookies and lemonade, Hisashi shouted as he walked over with some refreshments and snacks for the children's break time. I also got some apple slices. Aizawa sighed, okay, 15-minute snack break everyone. What's after the break? Bakugo asked, taking a monster bite of his cookie. Well, we spent some time in the playground before we got back to the apartment to relax. Then, your guardians will pick you up afterwards. Hisashi informed everyone. That sounds nice. Momo commented, taking a sip of her ice lemonade. Iida munched on some apple slices as Izuku ranted about a new hero that controls paper. Hitachi listened as he took small bites of his cookie. They are growing up so fast. I remember when Hitachi was so small and was so shy he would hide behind us, but now he is talking to his friends with no trouble. And, Hisashi started to sniffle, shouted they are growing up too fast leaving the nest. Quiet down, Hisashi. Aizawa interrupted before looking at all the children as they ate their snacks together. He chuckled when he saw Bakugo offering up an apple slice in exchange for Izuku's cookie. They are growing up, but it is not the end of the world. It is only the beginning of the rest of their lives. Midnight was finishing up something in her office to get ready to leave. She only had to organize some reports to give to the police to add to their databases. She was in the middle of manila folders when her agent came in politely. Her agent smiled as their long hair was pulled back into a high ponytail. Hello Miss Kayama. How are you doing? I'm doing fine. How are you? Midnight returned the greeting. Her agent answered back while shifting a clipboard in her hands. My day has been going well, Miss Midnight. I have an offer for you to read at a children's hospital. I have been informed by Ingenium's agent that he has already signed up to be there and he is bringing his brother along with him. Midnight raised a brow before looking at her desk calendar. Do I have anything planned for that day? I don't want to have a packed day. Her agent opened up her agenda. You only have about a 2-hour patrol after the time and a short 20-minute interview before the time slot. Not too crowded at all. The hospital has offered to babysit your son, Izuku, and Ingenium's little brother. Will you two read to the other children if you would like? You don't have to bring Izuku if you didn't want to. No. This sounds like a nice opportunity. Plus, I would get to read to little children with one of my best friends. And my son can hang out with one of his friends as well. There seems to be no downside to this. Sign me up. Midnight replied. Got it right away, miss. Her agent did a little bow before exiting the door. You know you can call me Namuri, Midnight shouted as the door closed behind her agent. She rolled her eyes before packing up some of her stuff to go pick up her son from her friend's apartment. It took about an hour to get there from her agency because of the traffic, but she finally made it. Hey Nem. Come on in. Hitachi and Izawa retired early for a nap on the couch. Hisashi welcomes her. Namuri looked past him to see that Izawa was indeed napping on the couch with Hitachi right next to him. Hitachi was leaning on Izawa while he sat back against the cushions of the couch. They had a large quilt thrown over both of them. Momo and Bakugo got picked up earlier. Oh, but Tensei and Tenyu are still here. Hisashi informed her, taking her coat for her so she wouldn't feel so warm in the apartment. She walked in with a smile after she hugged her long-haired friend. Hey, she greeted her friend who was leaning against the kitchen counter. Hi, I heard you are joining me for the children's hospital story reading in 2 days. Are you excited for it? Tensei asked, sipping on his grapefruit juice in his thermos. Midnight nodded, watching Tenyu play Go Fish with Izuku on the carpet. Yeah, I hope that Tenyu and Izuku have fun while we read and talk to the rather children. Yeah, I just hope my baby bro doesn't get too jealous. Tensei said, raising his voice a little to grab his brother's attention. I won't, I'll be well behaved. I promise. Tenyu promised from off to the side with Izuku giggling. Ooh, got any threes? Go Fish, Izuku replied back, quieting his giggles. Wait, does this mean I can come? Yay, of course you can. You two can play together the whole time, Midnight responded with Tensei's calming chuckle beside her. Tenyu groaned slightly when Izuku won the game only to cheer up when Izuku pounced onto him into a hug. Midnight and Ingeniums arrived at the hospital about 15 minutes early to make sure that Izuku and Tenyu were taken care of while they set up for the reading. We can set them up with our new intern, Tsubaki. He is very helpful and caring, and he will make sure the boys will stay safe. The intern greeted the boys with a slight wave and an easygoing smile. The two friends returned the wave while their guardians filled out check-in forms. The room is just upstairs, you may use the elevator. Tsubaki can show you the way there while he watches the children. The receptionist explained before pointing them in the right direction. After the elevator traveled up one floor, Tsubaki took the lead to show the adults where the room was. Just in here. The children should be waiting inside already. I'll keep an eye on the boys while you two do your thing. We should be in the room right at the end of the hall, it's a waiting room of sorts. I can put on a movie and set them up with some coloring books while they wait for you two to finish. Tsubaki informed them, allowing them to say their quick goodbyes. Midnight grabbed Izuku's hands into her own, behave for Mr. Tsubaki, alright. Okay, Izuku nodded, laughing when his mother kissed his forehead. I'll be back soon, Tenyu. Tensei said, lying his hand down on his younger brother's head to comfort him. I know, Nai-chan. Tenyu said, grinning when his brother ruffled up his hair. The three waved the two pro heroes off as they walked into a small room with a few nurses and a whole bunch of smiling children. Tsubaki smiled before taking the two down the hall, focused on getting them to the end room. Tenyu was walking with Izuku before he slowed to a stop in the middle of a doorway. Tsubaki noticed his stop as well as Izuku's curious expression while looking into the room. Guys, what's wrong? Two pair of eyes peeled into the hospital room right by the break room they were supposed to be in. There on the singular bed next to the window was a boy about their age with a bandage wrapped around his head. His hair was two different colors. He was signed with his back against the pillows of the raised bed, staring out the window emotionless with his right eye. His legs were curled up towards his body and his arms were wrapped around his knees. But the one thing that stood out to them was that the room felt so lonely. There was no flowers or baskets or any plushies that their own friends and family would gift them when they were sick. There was no drawings or cards from friends that wanted to make sure that they got well soon. It looked so sad and lonely. The boy looked so alone in the room all by himself. Ten-chan, Izuku mumbled, taking hold of Tenyu's hand. Izuku looked at Tsubaki to ask, can we spend some time with him? He looks lonely. I don't think it's allowed to just walk into someone's hospital room without their permission. Oh, okay. Tenyu replied. Tenyu looked at Izuku before peeking his head through the room, pardon. The boy looked up from his upright fetal position to stare at the two boys at his doorway. Can we come in? Tenyu asked the boy who just looked really confused at the question. We can watch a movie together and stuff and we can talk about heroes. My favorite is Midnight, but I also really like All Might, present Mick. I like All Might, the boy whispered. Cool, can we, come in so we could talk more? The boy nodded shyly. Tsubaki just shrugged before making the two wipe their hands with hand sanitizer before letting them go into the room. Tsubaki made sure the kids were safe inside the room before quickly running into the break room to receive an animated All Might movie for the three to enjoy. I'm Kayama Izuku. This is Ida Tenyu. What's your name? Izuku introduced himself and Tenyu. You can call me Shoto. Shoto introduced himself with a nod, falling silent again when Tsubaki entered the room suddenly. Tsubaki set up the movie and took a seat between the children's and the door while the three chatted amongst themselves. Does your head still hurt? Tenya asked. Shoto shrugged, rubbing at his arm, only a little. My eye hurts the most. The doctors say it will leave a scar and that I might have a little trouble seeing out of my left eye. Well, I hope you can become better real soon. Ooh, and maybe we can all play together again as friends. Izuku responded, cheering when the animated All Might defeated a villain. Friends? Shoto asked, tilting his head at them. Yeah, friends, Tenya agreed before seeing the bewildered expression on the other's face. Don't you have friends? Shoto looked at them. I have never had a friend before. Well, we would be most grateful if you would consider us to know your friends, Tenya smiled. Yeah, we could talk about heroes together, Izuku agreed. Shoto smiled softly for what seemed like the first time since that day. Those little munchkins were adorable. Namuri whispered to her friend. Tensei grinned back at her. I'm glad we could be there to spend some time with them. They look so happy to see us. Namuri smiled. Yeah, if they ever need someone to read again, I'll be happy to do it. I'm right there with you. Tensei replied back. Now, let's pick up the kids. The two started to walk towards the room when they heard familiar laughter from another room right next to the break room. They looked at each other before peeking in. Tsubaki was keeping an eye on the children. While the end credits a movie began to roll on the television screen. Izuku and Tenya were sitting right next to a boy about their age who was sitting on the bed. Aizu? Namuri asked, poking her head into the room. Mama? Hi, come meet Shoto, he is our new friend, Izuku called out with a smile. New friend? Tensei piped in, poking his head out behind Namuri. Hello, brother, Tenya waved. Tsubaki bowed to the respected pro heroes as the pair entered the room. I was weak to their puppy eyes, forgive me. Tensei laughed, as long as they are safe where they are, it doesn't matter to me. Hello Shoto. I heard you are all friends. Namuri said. Shoto nodded, yes, I have never had a friend before. Tensei frowned, never. Why? Father doesn't really let me go outside and play as much as my siblings. I mostly use each day training. Shoto mumbled, scratching at his arms. Namuri surveyed the room while Izuku began to talk to Shoto again about All Might. Tensei took a glance down at the table next to the boy, only to see his name. Tensei pointed out to Namuri that this was Todoroki Shoto. Namuri whispered to ask him, isn't that the name of Endeavor? He must be one of Endeavor's kids. Tensei mumbled. One of them? He has like 4 of them. Wait, then where is his other 3 siblings? Last time I heard he was bragging about getting them private tutors. So, why aren't they here to comfort their little brother? Why is Endeavor not here? He took off patrol for several days, yet I don't see any trace of him being in this room. Namuri furiously whispered, not raising her voice at all, so she wouldn't alert the children. This all seems very off-putting to me. It feels strange, you know? Tensei asked. Yeah, Namuri said, watching the soft smile return to the boy's face. And I don't like it. Suspicions are correct. Midnight and Ingenium both had a suspicious feeling about Endeavor and what was going on behind closed doors. Midnight had actually learned from Shoto that his sister and one of his older brothers would stop by after their tutoring to check on him. When she asked if his father visited him, he flinched and said no in the most vulnerable voice she had ever heard. When she asked about his other older brother, he tensed up and shook his head. So safe to say, the two friends were having a gut feeling that something wasn't right. The gut feeling continued to grow when Ingenium told Midnight that he had seen Endeavor on one of his patrols. He explained to her that the older pro hero was in a bad mood and saying something about his masterpiece getting injured. Now, Midnight knows pet names. She called Izuku her little prince, her cute little frog, or the cute little frog prince. She wasn't that creative with nicknames. But masterpiece. That rubbed her the wrong way. It didn't sound like an affectionate nickname, it sounded like a title of an art project. It didn't sound like he was referring to his son at all. So the two met with their old friend Eraserhead to discuss what their next move would be. Do you have any evidence that something troubling might be going on? Aizawa asked his friend. Namuri shook her head slightly, not concrete proof, but we have suspicions. Shoto has not been visited by his father once in the hospital, and he said that only 2 of his siblings come to see them for only an hour after their tutoring before dinner. After that, they leave on their father's request. He set up an apparent time schedule to not let them around him for too long. Endeavor hasn't once mentioned his son or any of his children in conversation at all. But I heard him saying something about his masterpiece being injured while Shoto is in the hospital. And there have been multiple accounts of Endeavor acting very violently on certain days, which cause more property damage to the city. Tensei answered. Namuri looked into Aizawa's eyes pleadingly. We know it might not sound like a very troubling issue, but feel that something is very wrong. So can you help us, Shouda? Aizawa furrowed his brow. I can get us a warrant to search his house while he is on late afternoon patrol. Around that time, the siblings must be at the hospital visiting Shoto. So here is the plan that might work the best for this situation. The plan was set in motion. Midnight was to distract the siblings at the hospital while their father was out on patrol. Tensei and Aizawa would investigate the Todoroki house with a search warrant with a bit of backup just in case. They got a warrant from a police fixer who agreed that Endeavor has had some suspicions on hiding an illegal practice regarding his family. That didn't sit well when they heard it from his mouth. So there they were outside the Todoroki house, ready to move on Aizawa's signal. Aizawa and Tensei will go in first with about 3 more officers after them, and they have more backup outside waiting for a second signal if everything goes bad. Tensei nodded as soon as Aizawa gave them the signal. Together, they moved inside the house only to just feel the emptiness inside. It didn't feel like a home, not with the way everything looked so cold and empty. With a look to each other, the two old friends ventured deeper into the dark, empty house. Namuri brought Izuku with her to visit his friend Shoto. At the same time, Shoto said that his siblings visit. The girl with white hair with a hint of red looked up as soon as she walked into the room. "Hello, who are you?" Namuri smiled. "Oh hi, I'm Kayama Namuri. This is my son, Kayama Izuku. My son became friend Shoto a while ago, I was just bringing him for a visit. I can leave if you want some more privacy." "No, please. I would like to meet Shoto's new friend." A boy with spiky white hair said. "I'm Natsuo." Fayumi looked over to her more nervously. "I'm Fayumi. Shoto's older sister. I would also like to meet Shoto's friend since he doesn't really make any friends." "Izuku?" Shoto asked shyly, looking over to see his friend. "Sho-chan," Izuku said excitedly as he ran towards his bed. "I brought that All Might movie I was telling you about. I was wondering if we could watch it together. Would that be alright?" Namuri asked carefully. Fayumi nodded at the sight of her brother and his friend. "Yes, that won't be a problem at all. A movie sounds nice." Namuri smiled as she placed the movie into the hospital television's DVD player that Shoto's special room had. She couldn't help but wonder how her friends were holding up back at the house. Aizawa journeyed inside Endeavor's home office and began snooping around. He had already noticed that there seemed to be no pictures of the family at all throughout the house, especially in this office. There was barely anything in the house from what he could see. It took him a while to open the safe inside the office, only to find really incriminating papers. Aizawa's eyes opened wide once he saw a quirk marriage license. There was even a contract detailing that. Oh god. He bought his own wife, what the hell is wrong with him? Aizawa was gradually growing angrier when he was going through the papers. "Sir," one of the officers called out to him from the door, "we found a gym, but you might want to come see it for yourself." Aizawa frowned, placing the evidence into an officer's hands as he went with another to the gym. Once he stepped inside, he saw stains on the floor from who knows what. All he smelled was sweat, blood, and something burnt. He inspected the gym to see many of the equipment had scorch marks. The floor had a disgusting lingering smell of bile covered up by a cheap cleaning liquid. He was walking around the gym once he heard an unfamiliar scream from above him. Tensei separated from the others to go to the second floor to see if he could find anything up there. All of the rooms were basically storage or bedrooms. Each of the 3 bedrooms he found so far had been decorated traditionally in the Japanese style. They had some form of a plant in each one with a colored paper lamp in one corner. It was basically the same all the way down to the dark wood furniture. There were only some differences like the way everything was placed in the small decorations. Tensei made sure his footsteps were quiet the whole way, not knowing if there was any danger behind closed doors of each room. He didn't take long to reach the last room on the second floor. With a steady breath, he slowly opened the door only to see a flash of blue fire ignite and a loud scream comes from within. "No, leave me alone. It's okay, I'm Ingenium, a pro hero. I won't hurt you." Ingenium introduced himself to calm whoever was inside the room before he slowly opened the door. Tensei's eyes widened behind his helmet as he saw what he could only assume was the other Todoroki brother. The older Todoroki could have only been about 15 or 16, and the red burns he had all over him. Tensei took a step closer, but Tuya raised his hand to ignite his blue flame further. Tensei watched as Tuya winced when the flame started to flicker higher up his arm. "Hey, calm down. Please, trust me, I'm not going to hurt you." Tensei promised, taking off his Ingenium helmet as he heard the soft landing of his friend from a few feet away from the door. Tensei extended a hand towards Tuya only to be ignored by him as he still held up his blue flame as a defense. "We are here investigating Endeavor." Tuya's blue flame went out in surprise. "What? I had some suspicions along with a friend of mine when she saw your youngest brother in the hospital. We are only sorry we didn't figure it out sooner." "To you, I apologize," Tensei said. Tuya asked, "My brother? Is Shoto alright?" Tensei nodded, "He is overall okay at the hospital. Your siblings are there with my friend for protection as well. We will make sure you don't have to deal with your father ever again." Aizawa piped up from the doorway, "He is going to jail from all that I have gathered, seen and heard. I'm sorry that we weren't here sooner." Tuya remained silent. Tensei noticed how tense he was and thought it was best to bond with him since they were both older brothers. You know, I have a younger brother as well. I would do anything to protect him, even if it meant I get hurt in the process. Tuya nodded. Tuya thought about all the times he had to watch Shoto get dragged to the same gym that he was forced into. How he had to watch as Shoto was forced away from them to only focus on training. He knew how hard it was since he went through it all before Shoto got his quirk. He was there for Shoto to bandage his wounds. He was there the night that Shoto got burned by their mother, holding him close as they went to the hospital. He wasn't there at the hospital with them since a fight with their father resulted in the major burns he had all over his body now. Tensei relaxed his face into a kind smile. Older brothers stick out for their siblings, and I'm guessing you're like that as well. Tuya nodded. Tensei extended his hand again, then, let's work together to make sure you are all safe from him. Tuya took the gentle hero's hand in his. Okay. Back at the hospital, the movie was heading to the end credits when Nomuri got the message that the hunt in the house was over and they had all the evidence that they could need for a trial. Okay, I guess we should be getting home soon. Ah, I don't think you want to go home. What do you mean? Nomuri looked over to the two young ones before motioning to the older siblings to follow her outside. Once they got outside, she explained everything from her suspicions to the fact that everything was gathered. And now, you guys can be safe from him. We can have a trial ready by the end of next week at the earliest. Nomuri explained to a more somber Fayumi and a breathless Natsuo. Does that mean that we don't have to go back? Natsuo asked, having grateful tears in his eyes when Nomuri nodded. Fayumi pursed her lips, does this truly mean we are safe? Nomuri nodded. I will do my best to keep you away from him. I will try my hardest to keep your family safe. And our mother? Will she be safe from him too? Fayumi asked. Natsuo took a hold of his sister's hand to get rid of her hesitance. Yes, she will. I promise. Nomuri smiled. I want to make sure your whole family is safe away from him. And so, once the movie officially ended, Nomuri took the children to the police station when President Mick came up to watch over Shoto and Izuku while they go. Tuyapov. As soon as he got to the radio station, everything just seemed to be a blur from how fast it seemed everything was moving. He reunited with Fayumi and Natsuo after Recovery Girl tried to heal up his burns. He knew that he would still have light scarring because his burn wounds were older. After that, he joined his siblings to talk to a detective with a truth quirk. They each took turns telling their side of the story of how it was living at Endeavor's house. He was thankful that the man didn't refer to his sperm donor as his father. The court date was set for next week and he with his siblings were sent to live in the Iida household until the court date. Then the trial day arrived. Tuya crossed his fingers and just prayed that he and his siblings would make it out of there without him. He hoped that his siblings and their mother would be safe from him. Hours passed by with Endeavor's lawyers trying to crack any defense they had. They had everything in their favor from the way the jury was looking. Tuya's statement on his life that was becoming Shoto's and Natsuo's statement on how he and Fayumi are neglected and ignored seemed to have won over the jury's hearts. Endeavor's lawyers tried to defend their sperm donor by saying he was just training them and providing them with home. How he was a pro-hero, so he didn't have enough time with them. They were once again proven wrong by having Fayumi's own statement and his pro-hero scheduled hours for that earlier month. The last hit was when the contract and license of the illegal quirk marriage were brought out as evidence. The lawyers tried to dispute it only for their side to say that it is credible evidence because they were given a warrant. And from that, the jury decided Endeavor's fate. He was guilty of child neglect, spousal abuse, spousal gape, child abuse, non-hexual, and the act of illegal quirk marriage. Endeavor's hero license was stripped away from him permanently. He was given 60 years in jail with 10 years of probation. Tuya smiled as he watched his sperm donor walk away from the Ryle in handcuffs. All of a sudden, his two siblings were hugging him so tight while Shoto stood watching his father go with his eyes still bandaged up. Shoto looked up to his older brother with tears in his eyes before Tuya swooped down to pick him up in celebration. Their mother's care was transferred over to Kayama Nomuri. And their caretaker was the Iida family since Iida Tensei convinced them that they indeed had enough room. Is Shoto going to be more happy? Izuku questioned with his head positioned on his mother's lap as they both watched a comedy special on television. Nomuri hummed, I believe he will start to be more comfortable in his new life than the one he lived before. I'm sure he is happy with his family right now. Can I still visit him? Izuku asked, feeling his mother's fingers play with the curls in his hair. Nomuri smiled, of course, my little prince. Aftermath. It had been a week after the trial took place. The Iida family had become guardians to the Todoroki siblings. Shortly after Endeavor got situated in prison, Rei's family was found from the contract that Izawa had found for evidence. They had been given prison time for enacting in the act of illegal marriage since they sold their daughter to the Flame Hero. They were given a lighter load than Endeavor, but they still had to serve over 20 years in jail for their part in the whole situation. Hayama Namuri had been given the rights to oversee Rei's condition in the hospital until she is ready. Speaking of Midnight, she was actually on the way to see Rei right now since she dropped off Izuku to hang out with Hitachi. "Hello, I'm here to see Miss Rei." Namuri greeted, showing the young nurse her identification. "Yes, you called ahead on the way here. Please come with me, Miss Hayama." The nurse smiled, leading her down the hall. "Right this way," the nurse said softly as they made their way through the halls before stopping in front of the door. "She's inside this room right here. Come get me if you need anything else." "Yes, thank you," Namuri responded back to the kind nurse before they walked away. She took a deep breath before calmly opening the door to the small room. "Hello? Miss Rei?" Namuri asked softly. Rei turned her head away from the window. "Yes. Who is it?" "I'm Kame Namuri. I'm here to talk to you about some things that you might not have been informed of." Namuri introduced herself with a slight bow. "Okay, what is it?" Rei questioned, growing worried. Namuri smiled. "Well, to begin, I'm now in charge of you. Stay here." "What?" Rei asked, surprised. Namuri's eyes widened. "Oh, let me start from the beginning. You see, it all kind of started when my son had met yours at the hospital." And Rei listened to Namuri as she explained what had happened to her previous husband and her children. Rei was mostly calm the whole time until she had to weep once Namuri said that they were all safe. Namuri added, "My trusted friend's family has been enlisted as their guardians. I promise you that they are and forever will be safe from him from now on, especially you." Rei softly said, I'm so glad that they can be happier. I promise you that I will make sure you are taken good care of." "Is the hospital okay? No bad nurses I should be wary of?" Namuri asked. Rei smiled softly, wiping her tears with the tissues that Namuri handed her. "No, everyone has been so kind to me. I hope that one day when I trust myself enough, I can visit my children again. I can always bring them here to visit you if you are ready." Namuri nodded with a smile. "I brought some letters from your children, I brought some books for you to read, and I also brought you some activity books to pass time with." "Why thank you." Rei smiled, laughing a bit as she saw the amount of stuff that the young lady had pulled out of her bag. Rei smiled as Namuri talked to her about everything under the sun while keeping her company for about 2 hours. She heard many stories of the young woman's son that seemed to make friends quickly. Ever since their father went to jail, all of the siblings still was recovering from the fact that he was gone, he wouldn't be there to hurt them anymore. Duya's burn scars have lessened from Recovery Girl's help, even though they were still a dull shade of red that was almost pink compared to his pale skin. He kept complaining about his red hair that Mrs. Iida went ahead to get him some black hair dye to make him more comfortable. With his new black hair, his kind eyes stood out even more than before. Shoto's scar healed up after some more time to recover. He always waited to hear news about his mother from Izuku's mom. He was relieved to hear that his mother was worried about him and that she didn't hate him like he originally thought. Now, he always makes drawings for his mother from crayons that Izuku had given him. Then you always came by his room to either just talk about things or to have fun. Tenya, Izuku and him would go on play dates often. He even met a boy named Kitsuki, another shy boy named Hitachi, and a girl from the Aoi Rozu family named Momo. They were so nice to him, already claiming him to be a new friend. Natsuo might be young, but he knew that he didn't like the way their father had been treating them. He was always ignored along with his older sister. When his father went away to jail, he half expected to be treated the same as he was back in the house. He was basically the middle child who was ignored by most. But in the welcoming home of the Iida family, they always made sure he was comfortable. He never felt alone or ignored ever again. Now, he could play with his brothers without fear of being hurt or them being hurt because of him. He was allowed to watch shows and movies that he had never been allowed to watch. He could watch All Might specials with his youngest brother without having to hide it from others. He could finally be more of himself and not have to hold back anymore. Natsuo couldn't believe that he had been missing out on this all his life. Tensei was really nice to him, like he fully accepted him as a little brother. Ayumi didn't really know how to feel. All she wanted was for her family to be normal and not the way it was. She always felt like she was powerless, that she was too weak to stand up for her brothers back then. And now, she felt conflicted. Everyone was safe away from him now. Where did that leave them? Now they were all under the guardianship of the Iida family, who has been nothing but kind and welcoming to them. Ayumi felt her more conflicted feelings wearing more toward herself because all of this time passed by without her trying to do anything to help her brothers because she was too scared. Scared of what their father might do. Ayumi was just sitting in her room, gathering her thoughts about the whole situation when a knock at her door disrupted her. "Come in." Tensei came in. "Hey, how's it going?" "I'm doing fine." Ayumi lied, putting on a fake smile she practiced. "Hey, what's wrong?" Tensei questioned, walking inside the room. Ayumi's faux smile dropped a bit. "How do you know something is wrong?" "My older brother's senses are tingling." Tensei replied seriously. Ayumi laughed softly. "Okay. I guess you caught me." Tensei asked softly, "Are you okay with telling me what's wrong?" I'm disappointed with myself." Fayumi answered honestly. "Why?" Tensei asked, sitting down next to her. Fayumi shrugged, "I could never stand up to him. I couldn't help my brothers because I was too weak and scared of what might happen. Everybody gets scared. I get scared a bunch of time during my work. And you aren't weak." Tensei said, rubbing her back as her eyes filled with tears. But Fayumi began to sob. "I couldn't help them. I just wanted us all to be a happy, normal family, but it would never work. I just wish I could have done something. Anything to help." "Ah. Breathe in, breathe out," Tensei said, trying to calm her breathing down as she cried. "I might not be the best at words. But I will be here whenever you need someone to talk to." Ayumi sobbed into Tensei's shoulder for who knows how long as he just steadily offered her support through it. After a full month of relaxing into their new home, the siblings were getting along well. Izuku called proudly to his friend as he focused on trying to use his quirk a small amount. "Sho-chan, look, I can make little scarves like ice cream cone." Shodo remarked as he watched the different colored scarves dance in the air by swirling around each other. Izuku had been slowly learning how to control his quirk little by little with his another and his uncles. Uncle Izawa helped him out the most by giving tips to him like start in smaller before working his way to something bigger. Right now, he could just float himself along with small items that were about the same size as him. Scarves were easy to use with his telekinesis. "Wow. Cool." Natsuo commented on Izuku's scarves trick as he snacked on some cookies that Tensei had given him. "So, how are you guys doing since the trial? Has everything been okay? Do you guys feel comfortable here?" Namuri asked as she saw Tensei and Fayumi talking about their younger siblings. "Yeah. We've been a lot better here than in that house. Some of us are still getting used to it since we haven't really experienced anything like it before," Tuya answered, scratching at his cheek. "Tensei has been helping us out a lot with his family. Everyone has been so nice to us. It just makes me doubt if it will last sometimes." Namuri started into his blue eyes with determination in her eyes. "Hey, I promise that this family will not make you feel like before." "It won't. I know Tuya mumbled. "Izuku, Tuya needs a hug." Namuri called back towards her son who was now talking about Edshot while Natsuo wrapped one of the scarves around his face like a ninja. "What are you do?" Tuya was interrupted by the excited gasp from the small child. Humming, Izuku announced before making himself float towards the tall teen. "Hug time." Tuya widened his eyes as he accepted the incoming hug from Izuku. Natsuo saw it and immediately took this as his chance to run into his big brother so he could get a hug as well. Shoto stood to the side for a moment while he watched his big brother hug Natsuo and Izuku right before he attached himself like a koala to be part of the huge hug. Namuri laughed as Tuya continuously got hugged. She could see his mood improve when he saw how happier his little brothers were. Fayumi looked over with a calm smile to see her brothers getting along. It might take a little bit more time, but the siblings knew that this home was far better than the cold one they had before. Tuya finally laughed. "Group hug Fayumi, you get in here too." "What else?" Fayumi said before her older brother cornered her into a larger hug. Tensei laughed before picking up Tenya to join in. Namuri stood off to the side before Tensei pulled her in as well. Higher exposure. It has been many years of having Izuku in her life. Namuri wouldn't trade it for the world. It was one of those weekends when everyone's schedule would allow for them all to have a huge play date. It didn't happen very often, but when it did everyone had fun. It happened mostly only once a month. And when she says everyone, she means everyone. Aizawa, Hisashi, Tensei, Rei, Tuya, Fayumi, Natsuo, Shoto, Tenya, Hitachi, Momo, Kitsuki, Mitsuki, and Masaru. Everyone. Mitsuki had suggested they all go to the beach for today, which was a lovely idea. Miku was running after a frisbee that Izuku threw. Namuri has a laugh behind her hand when Miku ran full speed with a frisbee in her mouth before tackling Izuku to the soft wet sand underneath him. His joyous laughter was heard from under the fluffy curls of Miku's fur. Shoto was making a sandcastle with his sister a few feet away, which turned into him accidentally making it covered with ice on accident when he sneezed. Fayumi laughed while Shoto blankly stared at the ice castle before shrugging and making tiny snowmen to live inside it. Natsuo was splashing the seawater on his older brother, Tuya. Tuya was returning the favor tenfold with his flaming arms hitting the waves towards his younger brother. Tuya had only graduated from UA about a year ago and was already an official sidekick to Ingenium, while Natsuo was still in middle school. Aizawa was taking a nap, which made the perfect opportunity for Hisashi to take the chance to cover him in the sand. Right now, Aizawa was rocking one hell of a mermaid tail. Hisashi even decorated the end with little shells that he found nearby to really give it an elegant design. Momo helped out, gathering all the best looking ones for the decorating. Momo really liked to collect the coolest seashells she found on the beach, especially the ones that she found under the waves. Hitachi was relaxing on the blanket next to his father's, fighting the urge to sleep just from the tea blend that Momo had to give him earlier. It must have been a type of sleepy time tea. Tensei and Tenyu were running along the sandy beach before Namuri watched them charge headfirst into the incoming wave. She straightened up to make sure they were alright, only to let out a sigh of relief when she was them both resurface. Natsuo welcomed them with a splash right to their face. Tenyu wipes his glasses with the back of his hand while his brother splashes back. And when Tensei splashes back, he used a bit of the engine in his arms to really give it some strength behind it. Mitsuki was sunbathing on her blanket while listening to her husband talk about the sketch he was working on. His hair was still wet from Mitsuki's earlier attempt of dragging him into the ocean waves with her. Safe to say, it didn't last that long, but it was a cute moment between the two of them. Namuri smiled as she watched Katsuki begin to play around with Izuku and Miku. She had watched Katsuki mostly making a huge sandcastle away from them before becoming bored. Namuri leaned back on her elbows after positioning her sunglasses back on her face. It was a very nice day to be out at the beach. Katsuki separated from Izuku while he was still playing in the seawater with Miku. Katsuki ran up to Shoto who was talking about something with Tuya. Tuya was drying his hair with a towel while Shoto was asking something. Katsuki was close enough to hear Shoto ask, "Know why Izuku doesn't like fire?" Tuya answered back, "I don't, but I know it must be pretty bad. I know he still has a feeling of unease towards it. I think he might be afraid of it, so I never really use my quirk when we all come together like this. I don't want to scare him with father's flames," Shoto admitted, tightening up his left fist. "Hey, it's no dad's quirk. It's yours." "Just like my own flame is my quirk," Tuya said, rubbing Shoto's head to mess up his hair. Katsuki thought back to the time after Izuku's quirk awakened. How his explosion was redirected and then all of a sudden the whole park around them was floating. He remembered how he felt responsible because he might have mistakenly triggered the memory from that night. He felt guilty about not being able to save his best friend from the overpowered trance he was in. After that, he was afraid to use any large explosions while Izuku was around. When Izuku asked to see his quirk, he would only make small compact sparks that stayed on his hands, so Izuku wouldn't freak out as much. He was there to see Izuku flinch at a bonfire, stare amazingly at his sparks, and to ignore a large candle. He really didn't know how large Izuku's fear was, but he knew that Izuku's fear was real. Katsuki spoke up, "I think we should talk to Auntie about this. Izuku's fear isn't really my place to guess, so Aunt Nem can help us out." Tuya shrugged, holding out his hand for the young Shoto to hold as they followed Bakugo back to Namuri's blanket nestled into the sand. Namuri looked up at them and mailed. Slushed her sunglasses onto her head to look at them fully. "Hi, you three. Are you having fun? Do you guys need anything?" "We are all good, Aunt Nem, but Shoto had a question," Bakugo piped up. Namuri looked to Shoto, "What is it? Does Izuku hate fire?" Shoto questioned, holding onto Tuya's leg. "It's a bit more complicated than that. He doesn't necessarily hate fire entirely, he just has a certain fear to it that I can't quite pinpoint," Namuri explained. "Izuku's mother passed away in an incident that his father caused. I adopted him as my own shortly after the situation to provide him a happy home. After all these years, his mother's death still affects him. He still has a big fear of fire, especially when it is too close around him." Shoto's eyes widened slightly, "Is my fire bothering him? Am I bothering him?" "No, Shoto-kun. It's just that he is afraid of fire, he isn't afraid of any of you. You three are his friends, he knows that you wouldn't hurt anyone." Namuri answered back. "But he still is hesitant about our quirks, right? I wouldn't blame him if that were the case. Fire can get pretty intense, I should know," Tuya said while Izuku listened. Katsuki looked to see Izuku with a contemplative expression on his face. "Izuku," Bakugo greeted, making the others look back at Izuku. Izuku replied, "I don't want you guys to be scared of upsetting me. I might be afraid of fire, but I'm not scared of any of you. And I don't want you to be scared to use your quirk around me either. Izuku. It's okay. If you are uncomfortable, you can just tell us and stuff. We just won't use our quirks around you that much if you are scared of it," Tuya suggested. "That's just it. Izuku took a deep breath, "I don't want to be scared of it anymore. I want to be a hero, I want to save others, how can I do that if I'm afraid of rushing into a fire to help someone?" Namuri asked with a head tilt, "What are you trying to propose here? Let's make me not scared anymore. I'm not scared as I was back then, but I'm still afraid of fire hurting anyone. Maybe you guys can help me become better at controlling my fear of it. Maybe we could find a way for me to no longer be afraid of it." Izuku explained his plan. Miku came up from behind him, allowing him to pet her fluffy ears in comfort. They heard a yawn from a few feet away. The four of them turned around to see a tired Izawa that was now awake. "That sounds like a good idea. I'll help you guys through it if you need it," he offered, putting a hand on his sandy mermaid tail hip. Tuya couldn't help it and started laughing so hard that he kneeled down to the sand to curl up. Shoto grinned before crawling onto his brother to try to calm him down from his loud laughter fit. Hisashi joins them in the laughter that was cut off quickly from his loud volume that was cancelled from Izawa's red glare. Eventually, everyone started to laugh in response. Mitsuki and Masaru looked back to see their son getting tackled into a hug by Izuku as everything went down. Natsuo was too busy drying his hair to notice why anyone was laughing, but the image of seeing Izawa looking sassy with a sand mermaid tail was enough to set him off into laughter. Tensei scooped up Tenya at hearing the laughter to join in the fun, while Momo giggled with Hitachi laying next to her. With the plan in their heads, Midnight took it into her own hands to start off with getting Izuku therapy. She mentally kicked herself for not doing it sooner, since he might have been struggling with his feelings for so much longer and she didn't even know. She took him to a trusted therapist for him to talk about his fear. She waited for them for about an hour or two before they came back out from the room. The therapist took her into the room to talk about what she could do to help him out with his fear. The therapist told her that she should try fire exposure therapy to get him used to it. If he shows no improvement, then she should come back and see if there is a need of another treatment. She nodded her head at the information, taking any pamphlet that the therapist gave her. When it was all done, Namuri took him for ice cream at the new place that just opened. Apparently they rolled ice cream there and it sounded pretty fun to try. And so, everyone had started to help out with Izuku's fear of fire. Uncle Hisashi took him back to their apartment one weekend to start off slow before he got more exposure with the three. Aizawa showed him some cool videos talking about the science behind fire. Hisashi showed him a video with a dancer that twirled around fire ribbons. Hitachi was right next to him during the experience, while they were both covered with a warm weighted blanket that calmed him down. His two friends, Momo and Tenya, helped him a bit while they were having a study session. Momo just simply allowed him to watch as she made herself a pot of tea for simple exposure. She then talked about how she loved the specific tea that they were both having. Tenya was next to them the whole time, enjoying the peaceful tea time. He even chipped in with some facts that he learned from the fire that would be able to spark Izuku's interests. Like how s'mores taste differently over a campfire than they do with a regular stove flame. Izuku had training with Tuya first. Tuya started off with having a little wisp of blue fire from his fingertips before he threw them up into the air. He repeated the motion until Izuku looked more comfortable watching the wisps disappear into the air. Izuku likes the blue color of the flames, while Tuya kept manipulating them in different ways around him. With the blue color, he grew to dissociate it with the red fire often burning buildings that night. Tuya looked over to Izuku, "Now what do you think of fire as of now?" "What? You heard me. Just answer so I know where to start," Tuya replied. Izuku responded with a shrug, I don't know. I can't really feel the head from over here and I like the blue color of your flames. It seems so calming when you make them face like that in the air." "Why thank you," Tuya said. "Now, come closer. Just a few steps until you can feel a bit of heat from it, but not that much heat." "Okay. Okay," Izuku answered back as he stepped forward until he could feel a bit of warmth on his cheeks from the flame. Tuya continued to throw in little tricks with his blue flames before sending a fireball up into the air. Izuku watched it all with an amazed look on his face, with only the slightest hesitancy behind his eyes. "Would you like to hear about some stories I have?" Tuya asked him. Not waiting for an answer, he began, "Fire isn't all bad. And that should mean something coming from me. Our sperm donor tried to teach us that the more powerful your flames were, the more powerful you were. That the only strength that you could have was the flames you held. He taught that to me very well through the trainings he put me through." Tuya continued, "It wasn't until after the whole thing went down that I had begun to actually like my quirk again. Fire can do many other things other than hurting others. Tensei taught me and Shoto that there are many uses to fire. You use fire to cook delicious hot meals. You use the heat to warm your homes in winter. It provides the light when you are stuck in darkness. Fire can be destructive, but it's up to you to see how it can be used creatively." Tuya finished off by launching a large fireball towards a pile of sand behind him. Izuku shut his eyes when a puff of sand came flying from the impact point, only to open his eyes once it cleared. On the beach was a glass sculpture made from the heated sand that looked like a spiky open-faced flower. The glass was smaller than he thought it would be, but it looked strangely beautiful. It didn't quite look like finished glass, but it looked so pretty amongst the sand. Izuku had his training with Kitsuki on the same beach that Tuya had trained him before. It started the same way with Izuku at a safe distance away. Aizawa was here as well, surveying everything to make sure nothing happened. He did the same the other day apparently, but he was very good at hiding himself. Kitsuki started off by showing off small sparks from his hands, while Izuku watched intently. Izuku approached just a little bit to look at the sparks more closely. Then Kitsuki released a small explosion with hesitancy because he didn't want his friend to flinch away. Kitsuki looked at Izuku to make sure he didn't flinch before making a bigger explosion into the air. Aizawa watched as Izuku flexed his fingers just a bit before relaxing his fingertips again against his arm. Itsuki looked behind him, "Are you still okay?" Izuku nodded, walking just a bit closer to his friend. "I'm not really good with words, but I'm going to try to get this through your head," Kitsuki started. "I have been afraid to show off my explosions with you, no matter how strong I got. I always wanted to show you how far I've been growing, but it just feels like I will scare you. The last time I did a full explosion was when that thing in the park happened. And when that happened, I could do anything, I felt so weak. I got stronger with my quirk after that incident so I could protect your ass if something like that ever happened again. But I can't show you when I feel like if I do, it will just happen again," Kitsuki continued. "I want to save others like you when we become heroes with my quirk. With it, I can defeat the villains no problem and get rid of any debris in the way. Firepower can save other than hurt others." Itsuki ended it with shooting off a large explosion through his fingers, making a precise line of fire into the air. Izuku watched it go into the air wide eyes before he got tackled into a warm hug by Kitsuki. "I don't want to scare you anymore. I don't want to be the reason that you remember that horrible night. I don't want that. I want you to become stronger with me so we can still be the duo we wanted to," Kitsuki admitted. Izuku wrapped his arms around his friend. "I'm not afraid of you. What happened back then was the ember fell on a blade of grass too close to my face. When the fire started to spread in the grass, I freaked out. It wasn't your explosion or your sparks, it was the sight of the fire spreading on the grass. I like you little sparks, and I think the move you just did was amazing, Kaken." Then it was finally Shoto's turn. Aizawa was there in the background, wondering how this one will turn out. The other 2 days has been relatively good. But he had a feeling this one would be the one where he had to use his erasure quirk. Shoto has the red flames that were the same color as the ones that burned his old apartment building. Shoto started off much like his older brother with the little wisps of red flame from his hands. When he saw Izuku shift his fingers a bit, he started to use his ice as well to balance it out. Izuku became more relaxed at the display of ice, along with the smaller flames. Aizawa watched as the two friends kept going. Shoto made his flames a tad bigger when Izuku approached a bit closer, but also adding a bit of ice to counteract the growing flame. Aizawa kept watching, pinpointing the exact moments when Izuku felt the tiniest bit of hesitancy. Aizawa kept watching while Shoto backed up a bit in the sand. The next moment he didn't quite see happening the way it did. He saw Shoto trip backward while he made a large flame in his hand. When he tripped, the fire shot out from his hand into a stray bucket a few feet away from him that was buried halfway into the sand. The bucket caught the fire inside, letting the fire burn inside with what he could only assume was some kind of material that made for a great kindling. Shoto's head connected with something behind him which made him cry out in surprise. Aizawa was about to step in when he noticed the whole thing go down, only to pause when he notices that Izuku's eyes were flowing the same radioactive shade that it was that day. He turned his gaze from Shoot to Izuku, ready to erase his quirk if he began freaking out. But what he didn't expect was for Izuku to run towards Shoto, even if he was close to the fire. The radioactive shade to his eyes disappeared when he realized that his friend was hurt. He checked on his friend before using his telekinesis to manipulate the seawater to extinguish the fire burning in the plastic bucket. "Shu-chan, are you alright?" "I think my head hit something," Shoto answered back, allowing Aizawa to position him into a sitting position next to Izuku. Aizawa picked up a beer bottle that was hidden beneath the sand and groaned in disgust. He looked down at the two children, realizing that Izuku wasn't afraid of fire as much as he was before. He freaked out momentarily about the flame for a short instant before immediately running to his friend's side. He grinned down at them, rubbing his hand through Izuku's curls affectionately before going off to throw the glass bottle away into the trash. And with all of the exposure therapy, Izuku was beginning to feel more comfortable around a fire. Namuri watched as he twirled a little string of fire from a candle using his telekinesis. Namuri looked back to the shrine that she had finished to honor Inko. She peeked into the room she placed it in, watching the red of the incense burnt in her memory. She smiled at the photo that Mitsuki had copied for her that showed off Inko alone and another one with her and Izuku. She had put up a shrine after she had gathered the best materials to make an elegant shrine for her to remember Inko. "Thank you for allowing me to take care of him. I'll make sure he is happy forever." Izuku finally connects with the help that his fear is connected to his loved ones hurting, not necessarily fire. Fire could only manage to trigger him if it is hurting his loved ones, other than that he is totally neutral about it. Basically, if it is hurting family members or putting danger onto people he loves he grows out of control like a lot. Hint, hint USJ. His pyrophobia was more mild than severe. He doesn't really consider it an inconvenience, but it really isn't affecting his ability to function. He feels like he won't be able to save anyone from the fire if someone gets hurt. He fears that he will lose the people he loves again, and he doesn't want that to happen. Shoto and Izuku will bond over their fire fathers that they hate the most. Tuya will second that along with Natsuo and Fayumi. I hope I did well portraying his fear. A slow start of Izuku's training. It had not been that long since Izuku went under fire exposure therapy. It had only been about 3 months or so since then. And just a day ago was Izuku's 8th birthday. And after the party and festivities with everyone, she came to reflect on how much the others were growing. They seemed to be growing so fast, too fast for her liking. Natsuo was thinking over going into medical studies after he goes to high school, but he still has a long way to go since he is still in middle school. Fayumi was already in high school with the intent of trying to get her teaching degree to teach young children. Dewey is having fun being a sidekick to Ingenium, and the only complaint he had was with the paperwork. Namuri would laugh when she ran into Tuya if she ever visited Ingenium's agency if he was stuck doing paperwork. She lost count of how many times that she has seen his head slumped against the desk. Tensei informed her that Tenya had recently asked for him to guide him through training or at least give him some tips on how to start. And now she was sitting in her couch late at night wondering about what to do if Izuku came to her about the topic of training. "Mom?" Namuri looked up from the television to spot Izuku's head peeking out from the hallway. "Yes. Does Miku want to go for a walk?" Izuku shook his head. He came out into view to approach his mother. "No, she is taking a nap right now. But, I wanted to ask you something." "Sure. What is it?" Namuri asked, leaning against the armrest of the couch. "Can I start training? I'm already working on my quirk step by step, but I want to do more things. I want to learn how to fight," Izuku responded. "Are you absolutely sure? Are you ready for it?" she asked, resting her chin in her hand. Izuku nodded quickly. "Yes, I thought hard about it, I want to do this." "Alright," Namuri said, straightening up, "then I will support you and help you along the way. Do you have any plan of what you want to do first? Stamina? Flexibility? Fighting skill?" Izuku looked down at his hands. "I was thinking starting off slow in almost everything." "Gotcha," Namuri said as Izuku came to sit next to her. Once he plopped down, she opened the notebook app on her phone. "Considering your age, I don't want to do anything too harsh this early. For right now, let's focus on increasing your flexibility. Maybe some training in yoga will help with your flexibility and train your mind. Meditation will help train your attention and awareness. And you can always start doing gymnastic to combine strength and flexibility. This would be good safe start to your training, and we could move on to more stamina training afterwards." Izuku nodded his head as Kayama continued to look up places on her phone to start his training. The night ended with her finding 3 places for Izuku to begin his training. And his friends were invited as well. And that is how Izuku and Namuri were following with Momo as they took a yoga class together. Momo was delighted to join in the activity on that weekend under the promise that they would have tea afterwards. After a mostly relaxing round of stretching, they followed the instructor into the first pose. "Bend your knee slightly. Reach those hips high into the air," the instructor guided the small class into the downward dog position. "Make sure your fingers are fanned out wide to have your weight distributed evenly throughout your whole hand." Namuri breathed out as they began walking their hands back to their feet. Izuku had to be reminded softly by Momo to keep his knees bent. And then they slowly rose up from their position and stretched again. "And now all the way down," the instructor said while bringing their hands back down to the mat. "Go down on hand and knees into a tabletop position. Reach your right arm up to ceiling, take a deep breath and thread your right arm under your left until you rest with your right shoulder in the ground." "Ooh, I'm feeling something," Namuri whispered. "I might need to stretch a bit more. This position is awkward," Izuku admitted with his face plastered to his own mat, with his bottom half raised up. "Agreed, but it is quite relaxing," Momo replied as the instructor told them to do the same with their left arm. Izuku looked over to Momo. "PSST, what kind of tea are we going to have after this?" "I was thinking of a citrus morning blend to relax." Momo glanced over her shoulder to face him. "I also prepared scones ahead of time with some lemon jelly and whipped butter. Does that sound good?" "That sounds so nice," Izuku replied quickly as he stretched all the way down to the floor again. Izuku fell into a foam pit the next day when he started doing gymnastics. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine," Izuku called back, popping his head out of the foam cubes in the pit. "Actually, it's hard to get out of here. Harder than you may think." Hitachi snorted while he jumped on the trampolines to get to him. Once he got there, he extended a hand out for his cousin only for Izuku to drag him into the pit as well. Hitachi let out a short yelp before he fell down into the soft cubes of foam. Izuku laughed, trying to escape the pit as Hitachi slowly went after him. Aizawa pinched the space between his brows in mild annoyance as he approached the pit. Hitachi had successfully reached Izuku just as he almost made his way outside the pit, dragging him back. "Enough playing in the pit. Let's try balancing next," Aizawa said, extending his hands to grab both of their hands to guide them out of the pit. Aizawa guided Kayama and Shinso all the way to the balance beams to help them along. He made sure the floor was padded just in case that either of them fell off. Izuku raised a brow, first one to the end wins. Don't take a bet that you will lose, Hitachi smiled as they both climbed up on the balance beam. Hey. No rushing. Take your time on the beam or else you will fall off, Aizawa warned as the two of them steadied themselves. Yes, sensei, they said in unison as the two of them started to walk across the beam in wide stances. Izuku felt Aizawa's eyes on him to see if he might use his telekinesis to speed up the process. Both of them had their arms out on their sides to help with their balance. Don't fall. Don't fall. Don't fall, Izuku softly chanted as he tried to keep pace with Hitachi. But it didn't work because he looked up to see that his cousin beat him by 2 steps. I warned you, Shinso shrugged before making his way back. Izuku pouted before following his cousin back across the beam with his uncle's eyes on both of them to catch them if they misstepped. After the balance beam, the three started to work on standard stretches on the padded floor. Namuri walked in to see both boys struggling to get all the way down into the splits. Izuku whimpered, my legs are about to break. Ow, ow. It hurts, Hitachi mumbled, keeping his hands on the ground to stop himself from slipping down further onto the ground. Aizawa looked back at them with both of his legs fully down onto the floor, with an unimpressed look in his eyes. Don't push yourself too much yet. We still have a lot planned. We haven't even gotten to the hard stuff yet. Namuri stifled her laugh as the two turned back in mild fear and shock to Aizawa. And following the gymnastics training was the meditation lesson. Todoroki and Bakugo wanted to join. Well, it went more like that. Todoroki wanted to try it and Mitsuki thought it was a great idea for Katsuki to join. The simple meditation training plan turned into an overnight stay with the three at Izuku's home. So now, Izuku and Todoroki were trying to relax with Bakugo, which went about as well as Izuku expected it to. This is stupid, Bakugo grumbled, opening his eyes. How is this supposed to help? It helps you focus and be more aware of your surroundings, Todoroki explained calmly, not opening his eyes. Izuku peeks open his eyes to whisper back to his friend, this way we can hear all the sounds around us, since there is nothing distracting us from it. We can focus on the small sounds like the birds or the wind. Bakugo stared back at him. Izuku, we are inside your apartment. Then you might hear the sounds of the air vents. It works anywhere. I think I can hear the downstairs neighbors actually if I focus hard enough, Izuku replied softly, trying to focus on the muffled sounds coming through the floor. It sounds like they are playing a video game. Todoroki hummed, sounds like a racing game. I can hear one of them crash into something. How exactly is this supposed to help me be calm? I can't really focus or anything. Just give it time, Kaken. Plus, if you don't think this helps, maybe you can go back to taking those drum lessons, Izuku bumped his shoulder. Bakugo relaxed back into his position. I'll talk to my old hag about it. The race ended, Todoroki announced before they heard something crash from downstairs. Todoroki hummed again as they all started to hear muffled voices coming from below. Todoroki opened his mismatched eyes to announce, and sounds like someone has game rage. After that, Izuku managed to convince Bakugo to try again, so he can be the best at it. And that's how Namuri found three nearly silent boys with their eyes closed and their legs crossed in a small circle on the floor of her son's room. Sorry to break concentration. But do you three want something to eat? I was about to order in, Namuri offered, pushing her glasses up her nose. I would like some cold soba, Shoto opened his eyes momentarily before relaxing back. Bakugo turned his head back to her, anything spicy works for me. Izuku opened his eyes and faced his mom, I can eat anything. Namuri nodded, typing on her phone, got it. I'll order from that noodle place that delivers. So cold soba, spicy curry, and I'll get 2 orders of pork ramen. Go back to your thing and I'll call you 3 out when dinner gets here. Thanks, Mom, Izuku remarked followed by 2 calls of Todoroki and Bakugo, saying their thanks before they all relaxed back into a calm state. Namuri softly closed the door behind her, proud that her son was slowly making his way through training. She knew that he seemed to be growing up so fast, but she hoped that he wouldn't grow up too fast. But for now, she didn't want to worry about her little prince growing up. Right now, she was typing in the number of the noodle restaurant. Let me know in the comments below if you guys want the next part.